April 12th, 2012. This is our 16th meeting of the fiscal year, and we are both being broadcast and recorded live. The first couple of items on our agenda is the past minutes and the future meetings. But before we start that, I just want to say that this is Pete Jackson's last meeting with us after 5 wonderful years of service to the Planning Board, and I want to thank him on behalf of the other board members for his professional experience and expertise that he brought to the board, and for the many interesting discussions that we've had, and for the benefit of your participation in that. Thank you so much. So,
I second that.
So the approval of the past minutes, we have 2 sets of minutes.
We'll do intros.
Sorry?
Introductions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Eddie. I'm so busy thanking Peter, forgot to introduce the rest of us. I'm Emily Ennis, I'm chair.
Ed Duffy, member.
Alex Whiteside, I'm a member, and congratulations, Pete, on almost making 5 years.
Thank you. Pete Jackson, member. Bill Clark, planning director.
Thank you for the reminder, Eddie. So we have 2 sets of meeting minutes in front of us tonight, February 23rd and March 1st. We can take the 23rd.
I have some suggested changes.
Hey, let me have a look at these. All right, those are substantial enough that I think we should table those minutes for both sets. I also have some changes to the minutes of March 1st, Jean, which I will get to you over the weekend. So here are Alex's changes. Are there any other changes that people have?
I've got something on the March 1st. I'll give those to Jean.
Great. Thank you both. So we'll table those to our next meeting, which is April 26th and May 3rd. Note that we are off schedule. Town meeting is late this year. It begins May 7th, and we would normally meet that week, so we are meeting May 3rd instead. And then, of course, we will be posted for the nights of town meeting as well.
Bill, we need more chairs.
We do.
So town meeting starts on the 7th?
Town meeting starts the 7th. Yep,
Ah.
first Monday in May. So, okay. So for our agenda tonight, we're going to start with Citizens Speak. I should note that we have 2 public hearings, one at 6:45 for 131 Elliott Street, and one at 7:15 for the open space development off Hillside Street. For 131 Elliott, those of you who are here for that should know that the developer has requested a continuance. We will, however, be opening the public hearing, taking public comments, and the board will have some discussion on future dates and strategy on that during that hearing as well. And then we will be discussing the request for a continuance. So anybody who wishes to speak for Citizens Speak is welcome to come forward. And as per usual, identify yourself with your name and address.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Frank Schroth, 39 Avalon Road, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I only want to take a minute. As you mentioned, Mr. Jackson is retiring. I'm also the editor of My Town Matters, and I'm hosting a forum Saturday at 1 o'clock at Fuller Village. I am co-hosting this with the Milton High debate team. All candidates for townwide office are expected to be there. And Michael Kelly and Cheryl Tagayas, 2 of the candidates for the planning board, will be there. So I wanted to just take every opportunity I had to let the public know. The public's invited, 1 o'clock, I think it's 1372 Brush Hill Road.
Great, thank
Thanks
you very
very
much. Anybody else for the Citizens Speak? All right, in that case, we will move on. We still have a few minutes before 6:45. Bill, do we have enough time to do the A&R plan in the 5 minutes before we open the hearing?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's pull that forward.
On July 10, 2010, this board gave me permission to sign the A&R for 183 Lyman Road, 135 Gerald Road. I did, and the owner didn't file it on time with the Registry of Deeds.
What do you mean on time?
There's a 6-month requirement. They didn't file it within the 6 months. The registry kicked it out. They have to come back and have it re-signed.
Oh.
So there's
No
no change?
changes.
Okay, it's just a re-signing.
Just a re-sign, and you can
But it's a
sign
new
it.
plan, isn't it? Or are we signing the same?
You're signing the same one redated for today.
But it's a new Mylar.
It's a new Mylar.
Okay.
Same, no changes to the one that I signed
All right, well, I
in July.
would move that we authorize Mr. Clark to endorse this plan as not requiring subdivision approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?
Just remind me, Bill, this was a land swap between two lots,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yep.
I think I remember it.
No new lots are
Nothing
being
different,
created,
right.
they're
Right.
just adding land to one of the lots.
Right.
People on Lyman Road put a deck on the back of their house.
Right.
They would have been non-conforming. They bought some land from the people in the back, and now they're conforming.
Sounds perfectly reasonable.
The one on Gerald Road had plenty to spare.
Any other discussion from the board members? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Bill, you'll do the signatures.
You and I will go sign it. We're going to set up one of them first.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we go through the 36 Central, since we can make them get in and get out quick?
All right, they are not on the
I
agenda.
understand
No,
that.
no, so I'm
I'll
just
make
going to
that
explain.
explanation.
Make the explanation.
I
There you
will.
go.
Jerry? Jerry Foley's on the Board of Trustees for the condo, what is it, condo association for 36 Central. The second to last paragraph of the special permit allows for the condo association to issue parking spaces under the building for the residents only. This has nothing to do with the shared parking. This has nothing to do with the commercial units upstairs or the units next door. And it is in your packet. It's not on your agenda, so we can't discuss it. Mr. Foley will have to come back at the 26th, and we can vote for it then. It's right there, Alex.
We can vote for it or not vote for it.
Not
We
vote
can,
for
we
it.
can
If you
fully
go-
discuss it then. We
We
can't.
consider it.
You can consider it. If you go to that marked page and you look at that,
Okay, where it's flagged,
there you go.
that's the
That
issue.
paragraph says that the planning board will give to the condo association the right to disperse the residential parking spaces. Right now, the two units, if you go to the plan, if you look at the two units, the two
Oh,
parking
okay.
spaces that are beside the dumpster, it's residence parking, but it can be used for visitor parking, not just resident parking. At 5 o'clock in the morning, when they go to wheel the dumpster out, the resident doesn't want to get up to move his car, so there'd be some switching like that. One of the
Discussing
women
this,
that lives
we-
next door in
And
one of
he's
the
giving
top
us the
units
information. We
is
aren't
right beside the
discussing it.
dumpster and would prefer to have something away and put one of the visitors
Mercedes
there.
next to their car.
Is what?
Mercedes next to their car rather than a dumpster.
Probably,
I think we can save that for
But
the
I'm not-
26th.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a
Or
case
not at
of,
all?
This
Or
is-
not at all?
Yes.
that's all
Or not at all.
that's all it's about.
Okay. We apologize that you have to come back to us. Unfortunately, this didn't make it onto the agenda, and the relatively new open meeting laws require that we can't discuss something. We can receive information that's coming in, but we can't discuss something that's not on the agenda. So I
Well done.
apologize for that. You're done.
However, there is a good aspect to this in that you would have been at the end of the agenda, and so you would have had to sit through our entire meeting.
Appreciate it very much.
That's 3 hours.
Talk to you later.
Thank you. And that takes us to 6:45. So we are going to open the public hearing on 131 Elliott Street. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a quick update of where we are in this process. And then we're going to take any public comment that people may have on 131 Elliott. And then I'm going to introduce a couple of ideas that the board will need to discuss. Yes.
We note that Mr. Lynch is not here, but he's
Yes.
on his way, and we will ask that he review the,
Any relevant
The
portion.
tape.
Yes, exactly, the tape of this, so, and the minutes. So our last meeting of the planning board, which was at the beginning of March, we met, and it was the last public hearing for this, and we met, and among other things, we received public comment. We also went through this matrix of the zoning and the requirements under the zoning and compared that to the information that we had from the applicant to date. And we noted several deficiencies which we've asked the applicant to correct. And he has requested, as I've said, a continuance of this hearing because he is not ready to present today the items that we've asked him to correct. In the meantime, between the last meeting and now, there have been several different things happening. I and other members of the board have received some communication from the developer, which I'll summarize in a minute. Alex, Bill, Joe Prondak, the building commissioner, and I all met to discuss the issues of height, the grade plane, and the average grade around the building. And Alex, I'm going to ask you at some point during our discussions to summarize that. And then we received two other communications from the developer. I did, and Bill did. I received one, Bill received the other, requesting the continuance. So just to summarize the letters that, or the emails we've received, and we can go into them in more detail if we feel that it's necessary. Mr. Connolly had emailed me, Alex, Bernie, and Kevin Mern, so 3 members of the planning board and the town administrator, requesting us to, he'd heard a rumor and he'd requested us to respond to that rumor. And I emailed him back saying that because he had emailed a quorum of the planning board on a substantive issue, had any one of us done a reply all to reply on the substantive issue, that would be an open meeting law violation, and that he should in future communicate with just me, and that I would communicate with him separately about the process issues that he raised, which I did, sending an email just to him, and discuss the process that he'd asked the question on, and also what we expected to see from him in the next meeting. And he responded to that by CCing that email to Alex, Bernie, and Mr. Mern, and commenting on my comments. And my last email to him was to note that I couldn't continue further communication since he was emailing the other members of the board. But it was important that the 2 members of the board that had been left out of that sequence of events receive the communications, and that they be made public so that people would understand that the planning board had not attempted in any way, shape, or form to communicate outside of the meetings. The last meeting that the last email I received from him asked me personally to call him to discuss some of these issues. And I feel that all communication should now be going through the town planner rather than the members of the planning board. So Bill has taken up the mantle of communication, and he has sent Mr. Connolly an email based on Alex's and my discussions with the building commissioner. Alex, if you'd like to summarize the issues there for the public and for the other members of the board. Yes.
Chairman, can we get a copy of the memo that Mr. Clark sent to the Connollys about the height?
Yep.
Yep.
And actually, while you're
That now.
doing that, Bill, can you also copy that? I forgot to forward it to you, and that's the last one I received from Steve Connolly, and the board members should have a copy of that as well.
I also, being public documents, I'd like the email thread that you described here to be read into the record officially.
Okay, maybe we can do that after we've sort of summarized the what we've been doing, and then I'll read them into the
Okay.
record. Alex?
All right, well, the issue of the height of the building has been raised. And the height of the building is basically measured from the average grade, the perimeter of the building prior to construction without filling. And part of the new building, the outside wall will fall within the existing building, and therefore the question arises as to what the average grade of the site is without filling. And initially, we considered that we probably should assume that the building were to have been torn down and the cellar hole filled in establishing the average grade of the site. But some people have suggested that perhaps if they want that to be the actual average grade, perhaps they should tear the building down and fill it before proceeding on an average grade. In any event, the other issue is the number of stories, because if you look at the plans, it looks very much like it's a 5-story building. And the developer has said that he has determined that the first story, or what appears to be the first story, is actually the basement. And if it is the basement, under our business district zoning, the height of the floor above the basement can be no more than 4 feet above the average finished grade of the site. And we don't have a plan showing what the average finished grade, or we don't know what the finished grade is, so we can't determine what the average finished grade is. However, we did look at whether or not using the grade that had been used for determining height, using that and adding 4 feet, we determined that the first floor was too high. The building did not qualify as a basement, and in fact was the first story, and therefore the building would be a 5-story building and a story too tall. So
Bill has communicated this to the applicant, and we are awaiting his response. Presumably, we'll have that at the next meeting. And I want to clarify that, obviously the applicant is not with us today, and so we need to make sure that we communicate with the public everything that's been happening over the last month or so they're aware of it, but understand that the applicant is not here to provide us with answers or comments on anything that we say today.
however, putting it on the record is intended for the applicant to have plenty of time to address these issues when he comes in next.
Right, absolutely. So Pete has asked me to read the emails into the record. Do you all agree? Do you wish me to
You
do that?
want to read all of them or just?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I received an email, I think, from you and Bill Clark, and it was a copy of an email that the Conleys had sent asking for continuance.
Yes.
Did we act on that?
We are, you missed the first bit, Bernie, since you came in. What we're doing is we're
And I thought the time was 6:45.
6:45.
That's 6:45.
Right, it's 6:54 now.
Right.
We started right at 6:45.
Okay.
Yeah. So you didn't
I'll
miss
tell you that I'd
much.
be about 2 minutes late.
Yes, you didn't miss much. All I did was start introducing to the public what we've missed, what we've missed, what we did at the last meeting, and the emails that have gone back and forth since then. So you've only missed about, it's 6:55.
So that means I'd have to review tapes rather than you waiting a couple minutes for me to come?
We had
Okay.
asked before we actually started the meeting, and we're told that you would only be 2 minutes late. So
Right.
we had waited. We weren't sure when you'd be here. So, but I'm happy to repeat what I said, and that way you won't have
Sure,
to
then
review
I
the
won't
tape.
review the tapes.
Absolutely.
Good, thank you
Okay.
very much, Madam Chairman.
My pleasure. So again, we met at the last meeting to discuss the application, which is the beginning of March, and we went through this zoning matrix to discuss the requirements of the zoning and how the plan did or did not meet the requirements of that zoning. And the idea was that we would continue the meeting to today and allow the applicant sufficient time to come back with his response to those. And then we went on to discuss the fact that there are several emails that have gone around, some of which you'd received. And I summarized those emails, and I'm now about to potentially read them into the record. And that Alex and I and Bill had met with Joe Prondak to discuss the issues of height and the average grade and the grade plane. And that's right when you walked in was when Alex was giving the summary. So you did not miss very much. So thank you for calling me on that. Now, the question is, do you want me to read the emails into the record, or do you wish me
Couldn't
to
we
summarize
just
them? Or?
read the pertinent emails, because there are about 6 emails attached to that I received in Bill's packet.
Okay.
9 pages that I,
I'm not going to read all 9 pages. Let me see. Well, some of the reason of the 9 pages is because it has
Repeated
been,
over and over and over.
yeah, it's been repeated. So I can, why don't I read you the first, well, I'll start them. You stop me when you're ready. Okay, so the first email was Thursday, March 8th. It was from Steve Connolly. It was to me, Alex, Bernie, and Kevin Mern, and it said, "Hi, Emily. Since Tuesday evening, I have been told by 3 Milton residents that Peter Jackson is going to make a motion at the planning board meeting on April 12, 2012. The motion is going to move to deny our special permit application for 131 Elliott Street. Although it is hearsay, it has caused a substantial amount of concernment for us as applicants. I would like to have confirmation from the planning board members that they would not consider a denial motion for our application from Mr. Jackson. Regards, Stephen Connolly." Then my response was also sent on March 8th, and it was to Steve Connolly and copied to Alex, Bernie, and Kevin Mern. It says, "Gentlemen, I apologize for the tardy response. I just got home from work. Steve, your email was addressed to 3 members of the planning board. The confirmation you request would be in violation of the open meeting law. This, in turn, would place your application in jeopardy. Alex and Bernie, I know you are already aware of this legal requirement. Steve, I will respond to your email in the morning. Please address any future communication regarding planning board process to me only. Thank you, Emily." Then on March 9th, I sent, "Steve, I have not heard these rumors, nor has Peter Jackson or any other member of the board indicated an intention to make such a motion to me. Procedurally, a motion made and seconded must be considered and discussed as long as the motion is in proper form. We can discuss the format of the meeting as we get closer, although, as you know, we did not finish working our way through the zoning matrix, so that will be part of it. My question to you is whether you will be addressing the substance of last week's meeting on April 12th. We have identified several questions related to the zoning, and the public has raised their own concerns. As you know, in addition to the zoning provisions, which must be met as a minimum requirement of granting a special permit, we must also consider the public welfare. The substance of your response to the questions that were raised will, in large part, determine the tone and flow of the April meeting. I will continue to make the process as smooth and as fair to all parties as possible. As I said in my earlier email, please do not email other members of the board with requests for substantive discussions. Emily." Monday, March 12th, to me, copied to Alex, Bernie, and Kevin Mern, and including a copy of the email I just read. "Emily, this application process has been anything but fair to us as applicants. Your response to my question reveals what is wrong with this approval process. Meeting the zoning provisions is not the minimum requirement for a special permit. It is the major requirement for the issuance of a special permit. The bylaw reflects what the planning board sponsored at 3 different town meetings in 2006 and 2007. It is what the representatives of our town expect for the build-out of the site. Currently, the planning board meetings are non-productive due to 3 members of the public, Ellen DeNoyer, Cheryl Tagayas, and Peter Mullen. Peter Mullen has accused my team of impropriety regarding the data in our traffic study. He made the accusation because he clearly did not understand the data in the report. Ms. DeNoyer and Ms. Tagayas have made baseless and irresponsible representations of what could be developed on the site without a shred of analysis and data to back it up. Both Ms. DeNoyer and Ms. Tagayas have stated that they are friends of planning board member Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson has stated on the record that he is against this application and he has been asked on numerous occasions to recuse himself from the public hearing because of a conflict of interest issue he has with this application. These 3 individuals are not acting in the best interest of the town. They are acting in the best interest of Mr. Jackson, in my opinion. My hope is that the planning board adheres to what the residents of our town want rather than embracing the obstructionist view of a few people at the expense of our community. Regards, Steve C. And the final email in this section, Steve, is from me to Steve Connolly. Steve, I cannot respond to any emails that you copy to other members of the planning board. Please correspond with me only, Emily. And until, that was the last I heard from Mr. Connolly, and this is the one that you just received. And it was sent to me on April 5th, just to me. It says, Emily, I am stunned to see the alleged massing study and site analysis from Ms. DeNoyer on the town website as a submitted document. This is not her property, and she no authorization from us as applicants to submit any document on our development. You refused to post my completed application filed with the planning board in September 2010 and then post this garbage from Ms. DeNoyer. Call me, Emily, we have a lot to discuss. You sat in on meetings with Alex Whiteside, Kevin Murn, Jerry Connolly, and me, and we made all the changes to the proposal you and Alex suggested. The changes were embraced by Ed Duffy and Bernie Lynch. What happened? And then the last email was to Bill, myself, and I think Kevin requesting the continuance. So that's what I have. Now the next step I was going to ask for is for public comment, and then the board can, on 131 Elliott. Remembering, of course, that the developer isn't here, but hopefully he will review the tape, and then we'll go to board strategy and discussion of our next steps. Hello?
Madam Chairperson, Margaret Donovan, 41 Central Avenue. I am here to request that the board take a vote tonight to deny the special permit. And I will be making a presentation in support of my request. I call attention to these 3 sentences, or comments, however you want to describe them, and I will refer to them again later on in my presentation. Never listen. Who cares? Don't obey. In 2010, the applicant came before this board with a request for the special permit. The public hearing announcement was in the Thursday, July 8th edition, and the meeting was held on July 28th. And you might as well say these are the same headlines today. This was July 29th, 2010, Milton Times, Henry's plan called incomplete. July 29th, 2010. It's almost 2 years ago today. The applicant has had almost 2 years to come forward with a complete plan. He certainly has had plenty of assistance. I know that a couple of members of this board have tried to work with him to tell him what the zoning requires, and he continues to not complete the application. He continues to defy the board, just as he defied the Conservation Commission back in March of 2011. And when I say he defied the Conservation Commission, it wasn't until they came before this board at the last meeting, May 1st, that I first learned that he had actually gone before that commission the day before he cut down that tree. And he was told by that commission that he could not do it. they ordered him not to do it. He still went ahead and defied the commission and cut down the tree. I began to wonder why I was the only one. Why wasn't he speaking up in his own defense? Because he clearly had experienced a tree, branches falling down, on the house he built on Maple Street. You could certainly see what happened down at the corner of Brook Road and Rose Street. That tree fell down right on the house. You can see the base. And I've had limbs in my backyard. I'm saying, why isn't Mr. Conley coming forward before this board and justifying what he did? Well, he didn't, and it's only when I heard the Conservation Commission tell this board and the public, the last meeting, that they had said no, that it was very clear to me why he didn't come and speak in his own defense. So that was in March of 2011, over a year ago. And then on October 3rd, I wrote him a letter, and I'll pass around a copy to you. And it had my letterhead on it, including my telephone number. Dear Mr. Conley, neighbors and merchants are complaining about the ragweed. And when I say merchants, I had spoken with Mr. Mills because we both were noticed in the ragweed that was growing up on his lot. Neighbors and merchants are complaining about the ragweed farm that has grown at your property located at 131 Elliott Street, Milton. Whether there is a connection or not, it seems that the problem has become more severe since the diseased oak was removed from the property. For individuals who are allergic to ragweed pollen, the situation can be life-threatening. Although residents have become used to the ugly structure that sits on the site, the neighborhood does not need another issue to suffer through and/or bring to the attention of town boards. For the well-being of neighbors and transients, we would appreciate your removing the ragweed immediately, containing the pollen, so that it does not spread any more than it already has. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Margaret Donovan. I got a call from Steve Conley the day he received this, and he said to me to bear with him because he had been told by the Conservation Commission that he couldn't cut anything down there, as he didn't use the term punishment, but that was what he apparently meant for having cut down that tree. So for those of us with pollen allergies, we had to suffer through it. But of course, as he said, it would dissipate with the winter, the snow, the freeze, and so on. Well, anyone who knows what this winter has been like knows we haven't had a winter, and so the pollen is still there and is coming back in all its glory.
Margaret, I don't want to cut you off.
I beg it.
I don't want to cut you off, but I think we've
I'm
got a lot of
moving right
people.
along. I'm
Okay.
moving right along.
Just checking.
Okay. All right, so Planning Board should have brought the Conservation Commission before the board more than a year than when it did. It waited a year, but I can understand that because obviously you were trying to give the Conleys an opportunity to mitigate the damage and complete requirements for the special permit. In the meanwhile, there were continuance after continuance after continuance, and neighbors who came here to speak didn't get the opportunity to speak because it was continued, and/or there was a group of neighbors that were here until 10 o'clock one night when the whole issue was the big issue, and the main issue was the traffic. And so they were not heard. Mr. Conley still is defying the town by not coming forward with a complete application. So I go back to the comments that I referred to earlier in the meeting, and this is the graffiti that's on the Henry's building right now, along with a picture of what I would call a wrench. This is new graffiti. This is how all of this got there, and it's spread all out, is a concern, a major concern, because if they can get up onto the building to put this on, then there's nothing to stop them from getting on up top and creating a fire. You're all aware with how dry it's been all year long. Some of you may or may not be aware of the big fire that took place at the Grove Manor in Braintree. I know that building well. It's a well-constructed building, and it houses assisted living people, Alzheimer's, dementia people, and others. All kinds of sprinklers, and yet it had Sunday a $1.7 million fire caused by a cigarette in the brush. On Monday of this week, there was some work being done in that area which we call the property. It used to be considered a house lot. It's attached to the Henry's property. It was blocked by two commercial trucks. So I went over after they were gone on Monday, and I went back there again today. And what has been going on, very hard to determine, except that it's loaded with brush. And there are branches and trees leaning up against that metal portion of that building, facing towards that empty lot. The graffiti, by the way, is on the Elliott side of the building. I am concerned about fire, especially because this past year has been so dry, especially because you read about a well-constructed, well-maintained building with $1.7 million in damage. I can show you where somebody could get right up onto that building. I'm not going to describe the position right here in public, but it would be very easy to start a conflagration.
On so the audience can see.
Conflagration at that site. And I am petrified that that's a possibility, especially because of now you've got graffiti there. And now we've had continuance after continuance after continuance. So I think it's time. I think it's time. It's not fair to the neighbors. It's not fair to the neighborhood. It's not fair to the residents of the town. It's not fair to the town that after almost 2 years, we haven't even begun to have a building, a structure there that we can all accept. Instead, what we have is a potential disaster. I think it's time, as I said, for the vote. I also think it's time for the town to take that property by eminent domain, and what better use of the community preservation funds for that purpose. And Madam Chairperson, I would request that I have a copy of it, and I know I've spoken with you. I would request that you explain what community preservation funds can be used for in connection with any property that's acquired through these funds.
We can
Thank
talk
you.
about it this week.
I beg your pardon?
I'll explain after we get through the
Okay.
the
Thank you so
public
much.
hearing. Yep. Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Please come forward. I will say that Margaret Donovan called me 2 nights ago
Yes.
to discuss some of her concerns and to let me know that she wanted to speak before the board tonight to discuss the fire danger, the graffiti, and the other comments. So just to let the board members know. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I also would like to mention that it's not normally my modus operandi to call members of the board. Usually I wait to the public, to the meetings, but I am very concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Keith Mills, 39 Hawthorne Road. I also own Esprit de Vin, 25 Central Ave. I guess first thing I'd like to say is, sorry to see you go, Peter. Even though we've agreed to disagree on more than one occasions, I think you brought a lot to the board and a lot to the town, and I think you'll be sorely missed. And I thank you for what you've done, for the community and for the neighborhood. With that being said, I guess my concern tonight that I'd like to relay is I almost feel like the system's being manipulated as a fact of this continuance. It's open and obvious that the respondent, Mr. Conley, and Peter haven't, got off on the best of ways, and part of me cannot help but think that this continuance is based upon Peter leaving the board, and the fact that he may be able to find a more sympathetic ear with the next person who comes in.
I'm actually going to stop you right there. I was going to address this later, but before you go further, you should all know that when the new person comes on, because there will be a new person with Peter rotating off, they will not be allowed to vote on this issue. They have not been to all of the hearings. You're only allowed to miss one hearing. And so they will be allowed to participate in any discussions if this goes beyond the election, but they will not be allowed to vote, which means that the 4 remaining members of the board, the 4 of us, in order to grant the special permit would have to vote unanimously. So
Unless
unless
he withdraws his application and refiles.
that's true too. But then it's a whole new thing.
Application.
Yes, absolutely. So sorry, Keith.
No,
I
that's
just
okay.
wanted to clarify
Well, I'm
that
glad
before
we
you went
put
forward.
that out there.
Yeah.
But again, my concern still is the manipulation of the system, and and the protocols that have been, I think, somewhat violated as we've gone through this procedure.
Okay.
So that's all I have to say. I need to get back to work. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Peter Mullen, 19 Gaskins Road, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. Since I'm mentioned in the emails that you read, I feel like I should come forward and respond to Mr. Conley's comments in some of those emails. I believe he characterized my involvement with regard to this application as being an obstructionist. I don't think I've been an obstructionist. That certainly hasn't been my intent. I have raised questions about some of the materials, and he claims that the questions I've raised with regard to the traffic study are based on an inaccurate understanding of the data in the traffic study. If the board will remember, back at the March 1st meeting, I spent some time with Mr. Conley's traffic expert. We went off into a side room, went through what he had done, and when we came back, I believe that the expert and I were both in agreement that when he did his traffic study with regard to 36 Central Avenue, he used one method of analyzing the potential number of trips to be generated, and that when he did his study with regard to the 131 Elliott Street project, he used a different methodology. And that I believe the board requested from the applicant that he do a further study using the original assumptions and see whether or not that would generate different numbers with regard to the number of trips to be generated out of the property. So I don't think it's based on a misunderstanding of the data at all. Let me say for the record that I want to see a good project at that site. I think everyone in the neighborhood, I think everyone on this board wants a good project at that site. I think Mr. Conley has been very short-sighted in the way he's dealt with this board with regard to that project. I think he has demonstrated a high degree of arrogance towards the board. I think with regard to his handling of the tree, I think that tonight not showing up and just assuming that there's some kind of a continuance is a similar view of arrogance. I understand the frustration that many people feel with regard to how long this application has been pending. I think sometimes the board gets unfairly criticized, or people assume that it's because of the way the board has been handling the application. I think if we go back and go through the record, we'll see that the delay, the time period that's been involved has been primarily because of the applicant. And I think this, the failure to appear tonight is a further indication of that in the request for a continuance. As I understand it, the reason he gave for a continuance tonight was that his architect was unavailable. Well, there were pending issues with regard to the traffic study, and that those issues certainly could have been taken care of tonight. I know there's been a request for the board to vote tonight and to turn down the application. I would urge the board not to do that. I think that you should give Mr. Conley one more chance. I think you should give him an opportunity to meet the pending requests that you've made to him. I think it would be helpful, useful to set some deadlines for him and tell him when he needs to get these things in. I think it's in the interest of everyone in the town, including Mr. Conley, to have a good project at that site, and hopefully we can get that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody else wish to speak?
I'm Ellen Denoyer. I live on Capon Street. I am very disturbed by Mr. Connolly's comments. Obviously, I will need more time to digest the comments that he's made and respond in a more credible way. But I find it very disturbing. I will say that I feel very lucky to live in a democracy with an open public process and to be able to hear the comments that were said about me to the planning board behind my back. I am very disappointed that Mr. Conley appears to be trying to twist this public process by privately contacting a quorum of planning board members. I'm very disappointed that he's chosen to malign members, some members of the public, not all, who have been exercising their right to participate in the public process. I'm very disappointed about the tone of his language. I certainly, as a professional, I resent my work being characterized as garbage. I would certainly not use that term about Mr. Conley's proposal, although I am very critical of his proposal. I'm a professional. I've come here in a professional manner and in a constructive way to try to enhance this process for the benefit of the town. I am very disappointed that Mr. Conley has asked for continuance. I'm frankly confused about why the planning board has met with someone over the last year and a half who, as I understand it from the board, has not filed a complete application that meets the requirements of the zoning. And I understand that most planning boards don't meet with applicants until they have a complete application. I think a year and a half to spend listening to someone without a complete application is an awfully long time. I think that's particularly the case with someone who appears not to be listening either to the board or to the public. I think that the board should make it very clear that Mr. Connolly is delaying the review of this project and that I would characterize Mr. Connolly as being obstructionist. I'm not sure what the appropriate action of the board is, but I would encourage you to think very seriously about what has transpired over the last year and a half, what has transpired over the last few weeks, and come up with what you consider to be appropriate action. But I think this is a very serious situation, and I'm very, very disappointed, and I'm very disturbed. So, thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? In that case, I'd like to thank all of you for your comments and to note that the planning board welcomes public participation and welcomes and thanks all of you who have participated so far, and we look forward to many years of welcoming the public. Again, the emails had to be made public. I'm sorry that there were people in there who were called out, but that's not the opinion of the planning board. It was simply to let everybody know what has happened in the last few weeks since our last meeting. All right, it's 7:25 now. We had a public hearing for Hillside at 7:15. The board, it was originally 7:15.
7:30.
7:30. It's 7:15 on our agenda. So.
7:30.
Well, let me finish. Interruptions, come on, people. What I was going to say is we do need to discuss what we're going to do about this request for continuance and also future strategy, but I appreciate that the people who are here for the Hillside project want to present their project, obviously. Would it be too much of an inconvenience to put this on hold till after the Hillside project has been discussed? I realize that there's also members of the public here. I'm trying to figure out a way to be fair to everybody time-wise. What do you think? Yes?
I think we owe it to the public who's come for this project to let them hear the remainder of our discussion rather than make them sit around for an hour or more in order to hear that. So I think we should continue with this until we complete a discussion, as we've often done in the past.
On Hillside, would you be amenable to waiting another 15 to 30 minutes?
Why should it take that long?
I don't know. I'm trying to give enough time to
My
the
own
board
feeling
to-
is that as much as I am disgusted with this process, that I think that we've got to move forward. And the developer is the developer. And if we don't work with them, nothing's going to happen on that site, and we're going to have that abandoned building with us possibly forever. I would move that we continue this hearing until our next hearing in April.
I'll second that motion.
April 26th, at what time, Bill? We don't have anything else scheduled for that night, do we?
No.
Not yet? Okay, so then we'll do 6:45. That is a motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
The first thing I'd like to comment is the email which we just received tonight of an email from Mr. Conley dated April 5th, in which he says, after accusing the planning board with not putting his things on the website, he says, "You sat in on meetings with Alex Whiteside, Kevin Myrne, Jerry Conley, and me, and we made all the changes to the proposal you and Alex suggested. These changes were embraced by Ed Duffy and Bernie Lynch. What happened?" The fact of you and Alex and Kevin Myrne sitting in and negotiating changes with the proponent outside of the public hearing and outside of the process here is a total violation of any kind of ethical action on the part of this board. There weren't 3 members of the planning board, so
You're crediting.
Whoa,
I
whoa,
gather
whoa,
you're
whoa,
crediting this email
hold on.
rather than
Alex.
asking what the facts are.
Yeah, hold on, Alex.
Well,
I have the same reaction.
And then there was no response to this that said these weren't the facts.
Oh.
That's because
So
I'm not
I'd like to hear
responding
about
to
the
him.
facts.
So those are not the facts. We
Yeah.
did not negotiate. this
Alex,
way.
Alex is absolutely correct. We
That's
did
what
not.
he's claiming.
Well, I understand that, but you are sort of selective when you decide that what he says is true and when it isn't.
Right, if
That's
you don't
fine.
credit his other information, how can you possibly credit this?
Then
The
fine,
answer
I'm happy to
is,
hear that you didn't negotiate outside of
absolutely
these
not.
meetings.
Either of us, either in the
That's enough of
separate
that.
meetings or in the one we had together. All we simply told him was, this is the zoning, this is what we expect you to produce, and I'd like to add that he still hasn't produced some of what we've asked him to
Okay.
produce. So
That
I absolutely
satisfies
agree with
my
Alex.
concern there.
Thank you.
Okay, on the issue of an extension that he's requested, I just want to make a statement. Tonight's my final meeting as a member of the planning board. I was hoping to have one more opportunity to attempt to shape the redevelopment proposal for the former Hendry site, but that's not going to happen. The applicant has repeatedly said that I'm opposed to the project and won't approve anything. Nothing could be further from the truth. I have been interested in the quality redevelopment of this property since I moved to the neighborhood 25 years ago. For the past 10 years, I have been actively and vocally supportive of the planning, zoning, and redevelopment of the Central Avenue Business District as co-chair of the Columbine Cliff Neighborhood Association, as a member of the Central Avenue Business District Revitalization Committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen, as a town meeting member, and as a member of the Planning Board. The project is important to the finances of the town, to the success of the business district, and to the livability of our neighborhood. This site is the linchpin of the business district revitalization for at least the next 50 years. I believe it is possible to design a great project with the current zoning, with the building square footage, area of commercial space, and number of residential units contained in the current proposal. My problem with the current proposal is the applicant has refused to engage with the planning board and the public in good faith in considering alternatives for site planning and building massing to assure the design is appropriate to the business district and the neighborhood. Yet these are the most basic of the planning board's responsibility under our site plan review and special permit granting authority. It is almost 2 years of public hearings on the project. Despite repeated pleas to consider alternatives, the site plan and building massing remain essentially the same. In my 5 years of on the planning board and over 30 years' experience in public review of development as a landscape architect, I have never encountered a project proponent who has refused to work with public bodies to address legitimate public comments. I understand the town wants to remove the eyesore and safety hazard of the current building and reap the financial benefits of the redevelopment. But the results of this project will be with us for 50 years or more, and it is important that it be done well. Although I won't be on the board to bring this process to completion, I want to say that it's time to make some decisions. The applicant can make the decision to address concerns and explore real design alternatives, or the planning board should make the decision to deny the application and bring the current process to a conclusion. Thank you.
There's a motion on the table to continue the public hearing till our next meet on April 26th at 6:45 p.m. Is there any other discussion?
I endorse that, and Mr. Mullen and Alex have cogently stated why that would be in the best interest, so I will go along with that, Madam Chair.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against?
One. Aye.
And abstentions, none. Thank you very much.
Is that 3-2?
No, that was 4-1. I voted in favor of
Oh.
continuing.
Did you vote yes?
I voted against continuance.
Did you vote against it?
No, I voted for it.
All right.
Four,
I thought you
four.
voted. Oh, you voted
I
for it.
voted
for it.
Okay. Okay.
Four,
All right.
1.
Okay.
All right.
Emily, Mrs. Denoyer.
Yes.
Is it possible to continue public comment for just a moment?
We haven't closed, it would be difficult. We have another hearing right now.
No, I understand, but I just would like to say for 1 minute, if possible.
Why not?
If it's 1 minute, okay, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to what Mr. Whiteside said about having to work with this developer, or that the existing building could be there forever. I think that is exactly what Mr. Connolly has hoped would happen. I think he has chosen to let his building deteriorate over the last 10 years in the hopes that both the board and the public would choose his development over the existing building. And frankly, I do not think that that is the only choice. I think that there are ways that the existing building could be dealt with. And I think, frankly, that the standard that should be held, that the proposed project should be held to, is if the site were vacant, what would be an appropriate project? Because I think that those are two very separate issues of dealing with the existing building and what the new building should be. And I think the standard really should be, what if the site were vacant? What if there were a parking lot there? Would his proposal be acceptable? So, thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, we are going to move on to the open space development off Hillside. So, just a few minutes late, I apologize.
What you do while they set up.
Yeah.
Emily,
that-
Ned give his...
While they're
They
setting
won't
up.
be- Yeah, while they set up.
Hi, Ned. Come and introduce what you're introducing.
Okay, good evening, Ned Corcoran, 70 Morton Road. I came here because it was suggested that there may be a gap
No,
between...
no, hang on. Keep setting up. Ned's just filling in while you set up. Okay, all right.
I came because it was suggested there may be a gap between the public hearings and that the board would like sort of a introduction to the application that we have filed today on behalf of the Sullivan family for site plan approval at 50 Elliott Street as part of the Milton Hill house. I have filed the application today. We start public hearing process before the Board of Appeals on April 25, and so we will be running concurrently with two boards.
Okay. And you're starting with us on May 3rd?
Start with you on May 3rd.
Okay.
We may not have authority, but I'll look at this.
Okay.
But I think that we may not have authority to do site plan approval of something that isn't,
Isn't through the ZBA yet?
I would just respond to that.
but.
I understand.
Oh,
Don't respond right
now, yes, exactly. I was going to say, we've already
We've got
been long enough on Hillside.
That's fine, I appreciate it, and on behalf of my long participation in matters before this board, I just want to congratulate Pete and thank him for his service on behalf of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Sorry to rush you.
Not a problem.
All right. Open space development in Hillside. Please come forward.
Tell me how you're going to proceed tonight. Are you going to have comments first, or are you going to have a presentation and then questions?
Presentation would be helpful, I think. So most people haven't seen this yet. And then we'll have comment after the presentation.
Well, that camera there.
Yeah, for the camera.
The
I'm just trying
audience
to
can
for
see
the
it up
camera.
here, too.
Yeah.
And we can see it
Yeah,
up
that's
there,
fine, as long
too.
as the camera can pick it up. We may have you adjust as we go.
Take Marion, okay.
More chairs somewhere, Bill?
Pick up the-
Are we having
More
comment?
chairs?
Good.
Is it
Sorry?
gonna
Are
pick
we
up
going
the
to comment?
Yeah.
Oh,
See it?
no, we're going to have the presentation first so that we can
No,
all
but
know
you
what
sit
the
down and
project
get
is.
No, I understand.
Marion's the lawyer for the
Oh,
project.
I didn't know. Okay.
Big Alex is going to move down.
Want to move down a little
Yep.
bit?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
How's that?
That's great.
That works.
Yeah,
I can
audience
see that
see it?
very, I can see that on the TV.
I don't know why that one's dark.
Welcome. Thank you for your patience, and thanks to your client and
Thank you.
Bob for your patience. We appreciate it.
I'm here tonight to present an initial explanation and description of an application for a 3-lot open space subdivision. Thank you very much. On Hillside Street. And I'm representing Todd Hamilton, who is the co-applicant currently for this property. He is a developer who has a purchase and sale agreement with the owners of the property, the Fandry estate. And we have plans here tonight. Bob Hannigan, who's drawn the plans, is here, and I think you should ask questions of me, but if I need help, I will certainly turn to Mr. Hannigan in terms of explaining the plans.
And Marion, I know many of us here know you, but if you could just.
Yes, I'm
mention your
sorry.
name for the
I'm very
record.
sorry.
It's all
I
right.
do know all of you, and I apologize for not introducing myself to everybody. I'm Marion McKettrick, and I'm the attorney representing Todd Hamilton tonight.
Thank
Who
you.
is a co-applicant in this application. And tonight, what I intend to do is to give you background information. You all do have a copy of the actual application, which briefly describes the purpose of this open space permit. But I'm going to give you some more details, and I think I killed a few trees getting ready for this meeting. So I also have copies of a number of more detailed memoranda just on some of the points that I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to go over give you an overview of the development site, talk about the history of the site. I also want to talk about constraints on development in this site, and then discuss some options for development with you in order to give you some perspective on why this particular choice is being presented. And I hope that this will help you to understand why an open space permit application has been chosen as the development option that would be most in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood, which is known as the Scottswood historic district in this very unique area of Milton. I will briefly also discuss the reasons why we included a scenic road application along with the open space permit. This is a development site that, excuse me, is approximately 15 acres. There's a, maybe can you point while I talk? Sure. That would be easier for me. There's a 30-foot wide right-of-way which extends approximately 900 feet from Hillside Street past other property also having a right to use the right-of-way to the proposed development site. The layout of the lots proposed that you see on this plan, actually you don't see it on this plan, but in one of the other plans, we'll pull it out for you, observes the wetlands boundaries which have been voted on by the Conservation Commission, as well as the setbacks which are required to qualify for an open space permit. So far, those are the two criteria that were used to lay out these proposed lots. We realize there may be discussion of other issues with the planning board, and that's why one of the reasons we're coming to you now in the middle of our Conservation Commission application process. This site is part of acreage which was known as Wentworth Farm as far back as 1851. At that time, Edith Safford's father-in-law purchased the property. Mrs. Safford's husband, who was Nathaniel Safford, inherited the property in 1921. The land remained much as it was from 1850 until the 1940s, when Mrs. Safford, who was a widow, began to sell parcels in a series of conveyances which were accompanied by recorded plans. Part of this 15-acre development site that we're looking at tonight is the last undivided remaining acreage of the Wentworth Farm. In addition, the site includes one recorded lot of approximately 47,000 square feet remaining from the Safford subdivision process in the 1940s. These parcels were purchased by the Fandry family in 1969. Later, in 1978, Joseph Fandry also purchased adjacent property with frontage on Ford Ranch Road. That lot has substantial wetlands as well as a stream, as you can see if you look at the plan, and the stream actually was relocated from its original location, which was in the middle of the lot, at the time Ford Ranch Road was developed, something you probably couldn't do today, but they relocated the stream and built the banks up, and you can see that when you go in to look at the site. While the intention at that time may have been to provide additional access to the property, this purchase predated most of today's environmental regulations as well as the Rivers Act, and these two issues have created substantial obstacles to using that lot to access this parcel today. And as you'll see when you take the site walk, this is a hilly site with uplands and low wet areas. It's covered by trees of small diameter, which indicates a history probably as open pasturage for the farm in all the upland areas. The Fandrys have owned the property for over 40 years. In 2005, Joseph Fandry passed away, and the property is now part of the estate, and the family intends to sell it. Family has paid estate taxes of approximately $145,000, and they pay annual taxes in the vicinity of $18,000 a year on this property. The first deeded, the driveway that comes into this property is a very important issue in this case because it's also the access that is being proposed by the owner and the applicant and the developer. And the reasons for that I will explain in more detail as we go along, but they relate to the environmental conditions on the lot that faces Ford Ranch Road. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about this driveway and its history, and I also have additional information which I'm going to provide to the board as background. The first deeded description of a right-of-way from Hillside Street on this property occurred in the description for a conveyance, a deed description of a lot by Edith Safford to Lyman Olmsted in 1941, and this is recorded on a plan. In 1946, additional lots were conveyed by Edith Safford, and plans for these lots were also recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Each deed conveys a right to use the right-of-way along with the lot, except for one lot at the entrance, which is now owned by the Lang Bedell family. Today, deriving from these conveyances by Edith Safford in the 1940s, there are 6 property owners with a deeded property right to use this right-of-way. The estate of Joseph Fandry, which owns the land occupied by the right-of-way, and shares the right to use it with 5 other landowners, the Jepson family at 165 Hillside Street, the Corliss family at 151 Hillside Street, the Foley family at 161 Hillside Street, the McDonough family at 147 Hillside Street, and the Bresnahan family at 159 Hillside Street, which is the entrance. The Fandrys have the right to use the right-of-way both from their original ownership of the lot where the right-of-way is located and through their acquisition of what was originally called Lot 3A, a recorded lot in earlier plans and in a 1964 plan, which is located between the Corliss and McDonough lots today and has never been developed. At present, 4 families have driveways entering the right-of-way: Bresnahans, McDonoughs, Corlisses, and Jepsons. The Foleys have separate access from Hillside Street, which they use as their primary access, and the McDonoughs have a separate driveway on Hillside Street and use both means of access. The Jepsons have the right to use another means of access from Hillside Street, but use this driveway as their access also. Only the Corlisses have no other way to get to their property other than this shared right-of-way, but all of these families have deeded rights to use it, whether they actually use it or not. And I will provide you with a memo that is much more detailed if you're interested in any aspect of this history of the right to use the right-of-way. Now, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about what the constraints are on development at this site. And they include environmental issues, issues relating to the private driveway, and issues which relate to impact on this historic and rural area of Milton. The environmental issues relate to the presence of wetlands as well as a stream on the lot facing Ford Ranch Road. The stream has not yet been determined to be perennial or intermittent. That's a very significant issue in terms of how much use can be made of land within certain number of feet of the stream. That determination is going to be made later this spring or this summer when there's a long period of conditions that will allow review of when water is flowing in the stream. It's just not clear at this point what the determination will be, and the Conservation Commission will be making that determination later on. The stream and the presence of wetlands both create challenges to developing the property. On January 17th, 2012, after several site walks with the Conservation Commission and several hearings, and after receiving additional evaluations and testimony from a wetlands consultant, Lenore White, the Planning Board voted the wetlands boundaries depicted on the plan before you. I'm sorry, the Conservation Commission voted the boundaries. And so that is the only vote so far that's been taken by the Conservation Commission. But that, we felt, allowed us at least to come to the Planning Board and to begin a discussion with the Planning Board about what your views might be about the development in this fashion. Those boundaries and the setbacks are the limits for the developable land as described here in this plan. So here we have 11.177 acres of upland and 4 acres of wetlands. And in this plan, there are 3 lots. Lot 3 is 4.054 acres. Lot 2 is 4.034 acres. And Lot 1 is 4.05, sorry.
7.
Yeah, that's a mistake, but it's approximately 7 acres. All 3 lots meet the minimum requirements of a 4-acre lot. But the most difficult lot probably is Lot 1, because that's the one that's near the stream and all the wetlands that are on the lot facing Ford Ranch Road. The Conservation Commission has continued its hearing on the application's notice of intent in order to consider the overall development plan and possible conditions after hearing from the Planning Board. In addition, time's required to evaluate the condition of the stream, as I said. The Conservation Commission has heard testimony about how the parcel could be accessed in the form of an alternative, what's called an alternatives analysis by the wetlands consultant. And I I've brought copies of the letter that the consultant wrote to the Conservation Commission on this issue. Hasn't been voted on by the commission, but this is what we've received so far. So I'll distribute those to each board member, and there's some extra copies there as well. The consultant's conclusion is that if access exists to this parcel that does not require extensive alteration of wetlands, and in this case, that's the 30-foot driveway, 30-foot width driveway, access would not be allowed through the wetlands and across the stream. Ms. White, I'm not going to, you can read the letter. It's not, there's been no determination by the Conservation Commission. But it's important to understand that this wetlands consultant, first of all, she's very, very experienced and qualified. She spent 20 years working for DEP. She heard appeals at DEP, and she's written some of the current regulations. And it was with her guidance that the applicant elected this form of development using the existing driveway for access, because it has been her advice that DEP would never allow access across all of these wetlands and a stream when there is already existing access available. So, this isn't a choice necessarily that has been arrived at by the owner or the developer by themselves, but it has been arrived at after extensive consultation with this wetlands or environmental consultant. She will be speaking further to the Conservation Commission and continues to be available to us if you need input or advice on this issue. Even though you're not the Conservation Commission, it clearly has an effect on what a development might be appropriate here. In addition, the development site is in an historic district, and the water from the Blue Hills above the site drains across the property and into the Pine Tree Brook watershed. So we feel that in such a location, the amount of development should be minimized. And we believe at this point from our analysis that a 3-lot development is the minimum that can be done and reasonably develop the property in a way that fits today's market and so forth. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. Even if access were somehow granted across the Ford Ranch Road lot, however, the cost of relocating wetlands and building a bridge across the stream would require a more extensive development to be financially worthwhile. At least that has been the conclusion of the developer that I'm working with. At a minimum, creating a roadway and bridge across the wetlands and stream would require multiple permits from MEPA, DEP, and the Army Corps of Engineers at a cost for permitting of over $150,000, and then actual construction costs would likely be over $750,000. So you're talking about a very substantial increase in the preparation costs for the site if that access is chosen. And it seems to us that that would require a different sort of development and a more intense development, probably one that would involve combining lots. In any case, that isn't the type of development that Mr. Hamilton's interested in doing, so we're just bringing this application to the board, and we want to see what you think about it. Another constraint that this site faces is that we're proposing using the driveway, and that in itself constrains what the development really can be, because this is a rural and historic area of the town, very unique, and the appearance should be continued to be that way, no matter what is done to develop the back lots. Our analysis is that the driveway must be used to access the property. But because this is already a shared right-of-way, a development of as few lots as possible is all that should be contemplated and is what will minimize the impact on the neighbors. In keeping with the purpose of the open space bylaw, the change to the driveway should be minimized both in terms of width, impact on existing vegetation, and design. At present, the drive is a 10-foot wide dirt surface that winds rather than going straight in. Providing the design is safe, any major private driveway proposed for this development really should adhere as closely as possible to the present appearance of the driveway in order to slow traffic and continue to be just a driveway as it always has been. The design that is proposed here, and this is a separate drawing of the design, and we've used some colors here in order to try to show you each element of the drawing. And as I talk about it, maybe, again, Bob, you could just point to the individual sections. First of all, you can see a green dotted line, which those are the borders, those are the lot line edges of the driveway as it goes in. Basically, it's a 30-foot wide right-of-way, and the green border depicts that 30-foot wide bit. Then you have, I guess actually what we've got in the plan at this point is a 12-foot private, is that what the width is? Bob, it says 12 foot on this, so.
Yeah, it's 12 feet, except for at the entrance.
Okay.
And at the turn circle.
All right, we have a 12-foot driveway in purple with the little yellow.
Actually,
gutter.
yeah, the purple is the existing driveway. And then
Okay,
the,
all right.
the yellow outline is what's proposed. And what I tried to do is I tried to track the existing driveway as much as possible, with the exception of the entrance where it was widened out. The entrance is proposed to be 24 feet wide. Made every effort to avoid the two major trees here. The center line of the proposed driveway is equidistant between the two trees. And I believe at that particular point in time, it's about 20 or 21 feet. And then it narrows down to 12 feet, and it continues 12 feet. Pretty much tracking the existing driveway all the way along to the circle. The only real major change is here. I wound it around this lot corner where the existing one seems to be real close across the Foley property. So I swung it up here away from the existing drive and then tracked it back as best as possible along the existing drive.
And the reason to make that change is simply that we didn't feel we could come to the planning board proposing a driveway that's actually on the lot line or even possibly slightly over the lot line of property that we didn't own. That isn't to say that there couldn't be discussion of locating the driveway that way, but it would involve reaching agreement with neighbors as to how that piece of land was going to be used.
And the limits of that driveway are laid out on the ground, except for this area, the turn circle.
The larger right-of-way, the 30-foot right-of-way, is potentially area where you can locate utilities. But again, the placement of utilities has to be handled very carefully here because you have trees that you want to leave in place and you want to affect as little as possible. And so the choice of location and where you put utilities is also determined by where the utilities tell you they have to go and how, what the town tells you about the water line. But given those conditions, the intention here is to keep the utilities away from sensitive plantings and trees, and to keep the roadway as small as it can be and still be safe for public safety vehicles and any other vehicles using the roadway. I just want to talk a little bit more about some of the plantings and the trees that are issues here, because they're quite important and we spent a lot of time looking at them. At the entrance to the driveway, there are two large trees, old trees. If they had to be removed, it would change, there's no question, the appearance of this entrance. So what the developer would like to do is to leave those trees in place and make every effort to locate the driveway, as we've already explained, at the midpoint between them so that we're as far away as possible from roots, which extend a long way in all directions probably. But, it's our assessment that it's possible to do that, and that's the intention. There's another old tree right there, which doesn't appear to be, threatened particularly, which would be left in place. And then there are some other markers that are of significant historic interest because there are granite posts which must go back a good distance. There's also a mailbox nearby. So these are all marked on the map. I think there's one more granite post that's not marked right now that we are going to put in. It's the other end just beyond where the McDonough's driveway comes out. There are bushes, there's a large hedge currently And it's actually almost in the middle of the right-of-way. It's pretty far out. It was planted in the right-of-way. I mean, this land has been used this way for a long time, and it's just been there. It's large, and it's a significant privacy issue for the McDonoughs, who have one entrance to their house on a circular driveway just off this right-of-way. So they certainly would like to see that hedge stay if it can. We recognize that's important to them, even though it is in the right-of-way. And so the driveway is designed right now to go past the hedges at enough of a distance that they will not be impacted and that they will be able to be kept there. Again, the placement of utilities hopefully can be done so that there is no impact as well. And they certainly can be placed on the, more on the side away from the hedge. But that does present quite a situation because of the fact that the hedge is actually in the right-of-way. It's not on the edges. And then as you move along the driveway, the next larger trees are on the side where the Corliss's property is, right there. They're not in here now, but we will be putting them on the plan, and you'll see them when you take a site walk. I think there's 2 trees, and there's finally a 3rd tree, which would have to be removed in order to make the turn into the cul-de-sac, but our understanding is that that tree is diseased and would have to be taken down anyway. If it needed to be replaced in some fashion, it could be, another tree could be planted. So the only tree we're aware would need to be removed is that last tree, which will, it's probably right here. Right in there. I think the board has received a letter from the fire chief. We took a sort of a site walk with the fire chief a few weeks ago and asked him to realistically assess both the fire safety situation on this driveway, the condition of the water lines, hydrants, and to look at where the proposed driveway is, and to look at the plantings and the trees and the hedges, and to tell us, whether a fire truck could get in there with the plan designed as it is now. And I think do you have that letter in front of you?
We just got it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to, I won't read the letter. I don't know if the chairman will choose to do that later, but basically, after review by the fire chief, it appears that this, I guess, what we have now in the plan is a 12-foot. We were talking to him even about a 10-foot wide surface at the time, paved surface, would accommodate our largest fire trucks, and a turning radius, as proposed in this plan, would provide a safe and fast entrance for fire safety purposes. And what he explained to us was that the way the driveway is designed right now, with the stone wall and the narrow entrance, in order to get into this driveway, a fire truck has to slow down to make the turn. It's a difficult turn. And that has been an issue in this area of town because there are a lot of historic driveways designed, sort of like this one is. It has been a public safety issue, and he would want the driveway to be widened in order to have safer, quicker access. When a fire truck wants to go in here, it's going to be in a hurry, and he wants it to be able to make the turn. The other thing is that with the driveway design that slightly opens the sides of the driveway from where it is now, a fire truck can turn in from either direction. And right now, they have to come in from Randolph Ave. And since he sends trucks from both directions to a fire up in this area, he would prefer to have ready access from both directions. The second issue he brought to our attention was the fact that currently there is only a hydrant outside on Hillside Street. There is a hydrant located in the woods, right in here. It is not working, has not been maintained. It cannot be used in case of fire, which means that the fire chief, to fight a fire here, has to attach a hose to the hydrant on Hillside Street, and then attach it, have a second truck and attach a hose from a second truck in order to reach the property at the end of the driveway, the 900-foot extent of the driveway. And he said this is the very limit of the ability of water to travel through the 2 hoses. And there's also a time issue because of having to do all those connections. So his recommendation, very strong recommendation, is that when a new water line is put under this driveway, as it would have to be for this development, that the water, that 2 new hydrants be installed, one at the cul-de-sac and one about halfway down. And that, in his opinion, would greatly enhance fire safety for everybody on this driveway, but and certainly would be required for any new houses further in. The water lines in these properties, which are privately owned water lines, are approximately 50 years old, and they will need replacement, just like all the town pipes do, in time, and sooner or later, we don't know. But, so regardless of whether a development occurs, property owners on the driveway are going to have to face the cost of replacing these lines, which they have to assume because they own the lines. One benefit of any development that goes in here would have to run a new water line in, and to the property owners would be that the cost of putting in the new water line would be borne by the developer and not by the other residents. In addition, the fire safety benefits, I think, are a significant real plus to doing anything at the end of this driveway. New water and gas lines will also ensure that there will be no major expense far into the future for any of the neighbors on the right-of-way, whereas the existing lines, both gas and water lines, are very old. Water pipes are very old. In addition, a paved surface will be easier to plow and will require less of an ongoing maintenance effort than the present dirt road, which has to be filled, which is done on a cooperative basis by the neighbors, but they have to bring gravel in and fill the holes in the road periodically, as they've explained it to me. Finally, in other open space developments permitted by the planning board, a covenant has been required specifying what the rights and responsibilities of the new homeowners will be with regard to the major private driveway. And I am providing you with a draft of such a covenant. This is not a final proposal for a covenant. It may not even be, exactly what's needed, but just to indicate that we have given some thought to this issue. The covenant would certainly require new property owners would be required to accept the covenant as part of their purchase, and whether and the costs of maintaining the outer part of the driveway that everybody is already on would be shared by more people, which should mean that the ongoing plowing expenses would be less for each of the residents who are currently on the driveway. I have copies of that somewhere in here, and I'll pass that around. You're not going to want to read it now because it's hard to read, but it was just based on other covenants that you've required for other open space developments. I just took some of that language and tried to apply it to this situation. Finally, I want to talk some about, but I think it's actually a very important part of understanding this proposal, about what other development options there are for this property. Those that we're aware of that have been looked at are the possibility of taking these back lots and combining them with adjacent lots in order to create a larger development. At the present time, at least, this is the development that the owners have agreed to pursue with the applicant. I can say that for the applicant I represent, Mr. Hamilton, he's only interested in the 3-lot development or smaller, because he's building a house almost completed on Harlan Street, and he would like to see the development be less intense, just in terms of how it would affect the neighborhood and how it even might affect his own property. There is one lot in this parcel, and can you go back to, I don't know if you'll be able to see it too well, but it's both actually, but you're right. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Okay. This lot was originally, I think it was described as Lot 3A in one of the original subdivision plans. It was first recorded at the Registry of Deeds as a lot on a plan in 1946. And I believe it was also reflected in a plan, a 1964 plan, and you will receive copies of those plans in the history of the right-of-way that I said I'm going to be giving you, so you will get a chance to actually look at them. And this lot has a deeded right to use the right-of-way. So there is a potential for developing that one lot as a lot because of it having been a recorded lot from much earlier. This is not something that I've had a chance to discuss with anyone. In fact, until we started thinking, well, we better reflect on what the development options are, we hadn't really looked at that. This isn't something that this developer says he wants to do, but it is possible that one lot could be developed and maybe even is possibly developable without any additional process with the planning board. It's certainly something that should be thought about, because if that could occur anyway, then there would still be an issue of using the driveway and having to make improvements in water lines and that sort of thing. And then finally, as I've already alluded to, or perhaps I haven't, but the bulk of this parcel could be developed as fewer than 3 lots. It could be developed as 1 lot. If there were a buyer out there that wanted to develop this as sort of an estate property, it would have one problem, which is that it wouldn't comply. The back lot was not a recorded lot on an earlier plan, so it would not comply with frontage requirements. It might be able to obtain a variance from the Board of Appeals to count the frontage on Ford Ranch Road, but use the driveway access to which it has a deeded right to use, the access which it already has right to use by deed. One thing Mr. Hamilton wants me to say tonight is that he has absolutely no objection to the potential of developing this property as 2 lots or 1 lot rather than 3. In fact, he thinks it would probably be wonderful if that happened, because it would even be less intense as a development. He said, and he's willing to be exploring that possibility, marketing it, and he's more than happy to talk to anyone who, neighbors and others, who have ideas along those lines or think that they have somebody who's interested. He did point out in a meeting, I think, that we had with McDonough's, that he's not sure how feasible it is, simply because it would have to be so expensive. And he is not sure how many people there are looking for that type of development in Milton, and this would be $4 million, $5 million, at least for the overall, and perhaps more for the overall price for buying the property and building whatever you were going to build in there. And he said there just aren't that many properties in Milton that sell for that kind of price. So it's a rare purchaser who's looking for this sort of lot. That doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, and people do look for very unusual properties up on Hillside Street, and they value its unique characteristics. So it's something that maybe will arise as a possibility. It's not before us now. And finally, I just want to talk briefly about the scenic roads application and explain why that's been included here. There is a stone wall at the entrance to the driveway that could be used or would be used to access these 3 new lots. In order to provide safe access for a fire truck and other large vehicles, the fire chief recommends widening the opening approximately 4 feet on each side. A more gradual turning angle then could be approached, as I explained before, by a fire truck. And a narrow opening becomes a safety issue when you're trying to get to a fire quickly. The stones in the stone wall that would have to be removed on either side could be used to build a stone wall along the edges of the entrance, if that's desirable, and if it would contribute to retaining the present look of the driveway entrance. The overall intent is to retain the present unobtrusive, historic, and rural appearance of the driveway entrance while creating a safe opening for larger vehicles. There are no trees in the right-of-way that would be affected. We've talked, I'm talking about trees at the entrance now because this is a scenic road application. I already talked about the fact that there are trees along the right-of-way. Those would also be protected with the exception of the one that's diseased. I believe that I received a copy of a letter from an attorney representing one of the neighbors raising the issue of the fact that this is an historic district. It's the Scott Woods Historic District. I'm not aware of specific restrictions on development as a result of being located in an historic district in Milton. It's definitely an issue and a characteristic, however, of this location. We believe that the choice of an open space permit application with only 3 lots is the right choice for this area because of the nature of the surrounding area, because it's an historic district, because it's very rural in appearance. We think, it seems to us at least, that this bylaw provision was written for this type of site, and that if at all possible, it ought to be utilized here. Although the developer would most likely not be building the homes, but would sell each lot once the infrastructure was in place, he would consider placing a design restriction in each deed, if it's considered desirable, that would restrict design of the homes to be built so that they would be in keeping with the historic appearance and the character of the neighborhood. And that completes my introductory explanation. Sorry it took a long time.
It was a very complete introductory explanation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask the board members if they have any initial questions, and then we're going to open it up for public comment, and you're welcome to come forward one at a time, state your name and address, and give us comments or questions. And then if you have questions, I'll redirect them to the right person to answer the question. So first of all, board members, any questions?
Have we determined a date for the site walk yet?
Good question. We were potentially looking at Saturday. Are people available on Saturday for a site walk this
I'm
Saturday?
not available.
Not available? Okay. We could look at pretty much any Saturday.
Sunday?
Sunday? Sunday, Saturday, following Saturday?
Sunday's okay for me.
I did.
I think the following Saturday, well, it depends on what time it is. I've got a morning appointment that one. Sunday?
This coming Sunday.
This coming
Sunday
Sunday?
when?
Tell me a time. Do you have a particular?
I'm
Go
going to
alone?
church, so
Well,
it would have to be in the...
Afternoon would be perfectly fine by me.
Yep, fine by me.
So-
Isn't there some sort of a candidates night on Sunday?
Oh, and actually, are we
186
allowed
might
to,
come.
are we allowed to do
Saturday
stuff
at
on?
1.
Saturday at 1? Yeah.
Yeah, can we work on a Sunday?
Can we
can't hold a
can we
meeting
work on a Sunday?
I don't think we
I
can.
don't think we can
can't
do.
hold-
We can do it on a Sunday.
Not a Sunday.
What about next Saturday at, well, we can't hold a public
How about-
meeting on a Sunday,
Well,
yeah.
some evening.
Evenings are tricky for me,
Okay,
but,
yeah.
you know, as it gets lighter, it might not be. What about next Saturday in the afternoon? Would that work for people?
Okay with me.
Could do it in the morning.
I can't do it in the morning, a weekend Saturday.
I don't.
No, that's not true. I could do it early morning.
I would think early morning would be the best time to do it.
8 o'clock?
Yeah,
8 o'clock on the
5:30?
21st?
5:30, fine.
All right.
The sun comes up early.
What are you saying?
The sun is up.
Marion, would 8 o'clock on the 21st be
How
acceptable?
about 9 o'clock? What's wrong with 9
I
o'clock?
have an appointment in town at 10, so I can't make it if we have a sidewalk at 9.
Okay with me.
All right. Okay, any other board questions?
Well, we do have in the rules and regulations of the planning board, we have a 600-foot maximum length for a street, which means that even if your street is 30 feet wide, it can be no more than 600 feet long without a waiver from the planning board. And usually we've required a second means of access to give a waiver. And here there's a driveway which is not as good a means of access as a street would be, which is 900 feet long. And it seems to me the planning board may very well look to its 600-foot limit in considering this application. And you mentioned that there is a buildable lot, not part of this, so that this potential 3-lot subdivision could easily, once the road is improved and new pipes are put in, and the owner of that lot could say, well, it's time to build myself, so the 3 lots become 4 lots.
Couldn't this be
May I answer
another,
that, or should I
couldn't
wait?
this be a cluster
Yeah, it's like-
development? No?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I think what I'd like to clarify, maybe I wasn't clear about that. The lot I'm talking about that's potentially buildable is part of the open space permit application. If you approve an open space permit application, it would not be buildable. because you would only approve 3 lots. I mean, that's all we're asking for. It's pretty confusing because Lot 1...
This is what, K85A?
You need it for the uplandability of the development itself.
You need all of the
Right,
acreage
right.
to do the open space. If it were a different type of development, yeah, I don't know. The reason the reason I brought that up is really more because there's no question there's a concern on the part of everyone about using the road to access more lots. The fact is, I think that it's possible to do at least 1 lot in here anyway. That doesn't mean it's the same as 3 and whatever. I mean, it only came up in the last few days. We haven't had a chance to talk to anyone about it. But that's just a thought I wanted you to keep in mind.
And Marion, I saw that Bob was willing to answer the 900-foot question.
I think the planning board and everyone needs to recognize that this filing is under subsection M of the zoning bylaw, and it is not a definitive subdivision filing.
However, if it were asking for a street, well, I understand it's asking for a major driveway, and if you
Okay.
can distinguish between what a street is and what the difference between a street and a major driveway is, other than the fact that the major driveway is a lesser construction, and then tell me why the major driveway should be allowed to be longer than we would allow a street to be.
Well, I suppose precedent is one, off of Woodland Road, Stonebridge Lane. Can't think of anything else immediately that comes to mind. But these are 2 different types of filings. Subsection M is specifically created for an open space development. It's not a definitive subdivision.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members?
I did want to just respond a little bit to that. Admittedly, I'm sort of a neophyte in this, but I have spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I guess my question for future discussion might be, well, I understand it's a long driveway and that you're talking about something that you would look at as a subdivision in another context, but what is the point of the open space permit bylaw? I thought the point of it was, first of all, the driveway does need to be, the access needs to be safe, and whatever the reasons are for setting that restriction, I think a response must be given. So I think further discussion would be good, and maybe we can answer them to your satisfaction, because obviously there's a concern. But if you, my understanding anyway, at least my reading of that section of the bylaw, is that you set up this approach to allow something that you normally would not allow in order to protect other interests that you think are very important. That's the simplest way I can explain it. But it's still a balance, and we still need to understand what the reasons would be for saying it should be only 600 feet rather than 900 feet, keeping in mind that this is an existing driveway that's been there for many years and is being used by the present homeowners. So I think it merits further discussion. I understand the concern, but I'd like to be able to address that, balancing those 2 interests.
I would just make 2 comments. The 24-foot wide opening of the driveway on Harlan Street, both in the new, there's a major new residence built there recently, I can't remember the number, and that we allowed a 16-foot opening, and the fire chief had no problem with the 16-foot driveway coming off of Harlan Street. And Mr. Hamilton's own development, open space development coming off of Harlan Street, I think that's a 16-foot wide driveway. So I don't know why we have to do 24 feet here. I know there's turning movements for vehicles and things, but I think that should be reconsidered.
Oh, I think just to respond briefly, I think the proposal is at the outside limits of, I think if the planning board felt that it could be narrower, the fire chief didn't actually specify quite this wide a driveway. And I think we might want to go back to him and ascertain for sure what he feels is the safe width. My recollection is that it was less.
Vehicles in and out, but he approved 16-foot driveways on Harlan Street, so I hope he would do so here in the interest of maintaining the historic character. The other thing in terms of historic character, I think it would be much less impacting both visually and environmentally if there was consideration to an unpaved driveway and continuing it as an unpaved driveway rather than paving it. And I know there's issues, and I won't be here to continue the hearing, so others will deal with this, but I did want to raise, two, I think, significant opportunities to reduce the impact of the driveway improvements on the site.
And we have had some discussion with about that with neighbors, and you're absolutely right that everybody would like to keep the driveway looking as rural as it can. We did receive a letter, your board received a letter from one neighbor talking about some of the difficulties of plowing and repairing the road. So it's an issue that I hope the planning board can give us some insight into as to what they really want to happen if you decide that you can work with this development plan otherwise. The developer, from his standpoint, it's easier to maintain, it's a surface that lasts longer, so his proposal is to pave it. But if the planning board says, no, you should consider something else because there are other reasons, I'm sure that the developer would be willing to look at other types of surfaces. And I think it's something that should be discussed because it's already come up with neighbors and I know they're concerned about it.
Any other questions from members of the board? Oh.
I just want to point out that the modification on the wall isn't 24 feet. There's an existing opening there, and it's probably 6 to 8 feet modification of the wall, and it's on this side, and that will be returned inside into the 30-foot. So it's a minor modification, relatively speaking.
But you said that it was a 24-foot wide driveway opening.
The entrance in the wall will be 24 feet. That's what we're requesting. But the modification will only be between 6 and 8 feet on this side. We're going to maintain the existing wall at this edge and just modify it on that edge.
And are you expecting that the 24-foot width between the stone walls will be fully paved, or are you expecting that there'll be a paved part, an apron, and then the wall?
It will be fully paved.
Yes.
Right.
It splays out. Okay. So I'm checking. Thank you.
Goes back to the same thing that Pete's talking about for 627.
Right.
You can drive on the grass.
Right. Anything else from board members? All right. In that case, Marion, I'm going to ask you and Bob to step aside. We'll have people come up one by one. First of all, I apologize for the size of the room. I don't think we quite anticipated the number of people, so thank you for your patience. And again, name, address, and your comments, please.
I'm Phil Johanning. I live at 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton. My worry about all this, obviously 3 lots is a fairly minor change, but when I look at the neighborhood itself at this moment, we really have 3 points of access: Harlan Street, Hillside Street, and Forest Street. And they're all basically abominably maintained. And in the most recent meetings of the selectmen, when they talk about street condition, they say that they have absolutely no idea when they'll have the money to repair the streets and when we'll find a little relief from what's going on. So now all of a sudden we have a big construction project. We have major trucks going in and out of the neighborhood. Have any of you driven on Hillside Street? Are you familiar with what it's like? I mean, your feelings fall out of your head.
It's been like that for about 300 years. That's why it's like that.
Yeah, but it's time to change. It's unfair to the neighbors to expect that we should continue to live with such abominable conditions going into our neighborhood. You talk about the quality of the neighborhood. It should have a quality street. You talk about the importance of stone walls. Who's going to enjoy them if they have to drive by on a street that's just not up to par? I think, before I could ever, if it were up to me, I would say that let's figure out where the money is going to come from to repair the streets that exist. Let's fund whatever needs to be funded in order to get those streets repaired. And then once that's done, let's go ahead and do whatever needs to be done here, whatever people agree to, that will be fine. And immediately after, let's fix the street.
Let's have a funded way of doing that. And I talked to Mr. Lynch at the Department of Public Works actually last year, and he said Hillside Street needs to be completely rebuilt. All right then. But nobody knows how that would ever be done. So it will continue to deteriorate. That's the only thing we can forecast at this moment. So if you can't provide services to me, an existing resident, why would we think about expanding the number of residents in the neighborhood? Shouldn't we worry about providing adequate services first and funding an effort to do that? Would that make sense to anyone? It makes sense to me. So that's all I have to say. I think we have inadequate services in the neighborhood. I think Hillside, Forest, and Harlan are not adequately maintained, and I would like to see them improved. A plan for improvement before we make any more changes to the neighborhood that would mean additional residents. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next person who wishes to speak? Anyone? Don't be shy. Yes.
I'd like to submit some pictures.
Come on up.
Pictures speak 1,000 words.
Remember your name and address.
I realize that my name is Jan Jepson. I live at 165 Hillside Street.
Okay.
I would just like to pass these pictures around. I know you're going to be doing a walkthrough, but this is the opening in question. And we're not real sure what happened, but Carolyn Bedell is a neighbor on the corner that has the elm tree, 150 to 200-year-old elm tree on her property, and she has.
Proposed opening?
This is the opening looking out to
The
Hillside
trees.
Street. So this is coming out of our properties, getting on to Hillside Street. That's the elm tree, and that is the
These
hickory.
trees right here.
Yes. Okay, that's the beautiful elm. With,
Still
I
have elm
believe-
trees in Milton?
Well, on Carolyn's property, yes.
I have several.
Oh,
Yep.
lucky.
And this tree did not get mentioned. It's the Bresnahan's tree. It's a fabulous ginkgo. I've never seen a tree like it. I don't know how old that tree is. But that is also right along where they're proposing to be paved. See the street right there? Okay, and then the Bresnahan's going that way. And their house is the yellow colonial in one of those pictures. And then this again is leaving the property going out onto Hillside Street. And that's the stake that's been positioned. And there's a hickory. And again, that's the ginkgo.
Is this part of the ginkgo?
Yes, that is
A
ginkgo.
wire down.
No, that's not. That's a grapevine.
Okay.
Sorry, my husband said the same thing. Why'd you cut that? But anyway, I just wanted you to see that area because I think it just helps you visualize where we're living and that it has an impact on.
And I should say before the next person comes up, first of all, thank you, but also Bill had called me up a couple of weeks ago and said, I'm going to walk the property with Mrs. McCatrick, do you want to come? So I have had a chance myself, although the board members haven't, the rest of the board hasn't, to see what a special area this is and how much it probably means to the residents there. So thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak? Well, I meant from the public. Hold on a sec. Yes, please come up. You'll get your turn.
I'm Jim Corliss. This is my wife Kathleen.
Welcome.
Thank you. My wife and I want to voice our opposition to the development for a couple of reasons. Hillside Street, through which this development would be accessed, is a unique. It's unique in Milton. It's probably unique inside 128. So it's Hillside Street's in a National Historic District, and it's a designated scenic road. Any town resident, however, who happens to drive down Hillside Street doesn't need an official designation to appreciate the rural charm of the area with stone walls on either side and stately trees. We've all seen a lot of development on Hillside Street in the last decade or so, and I think that bit by bit it is changing the rural feel of the street to the detriment of the town. The proposed development before you is very large. I think it's 13 acres, I think. I'm not sure. How many acres is the whole? 15 acres. It's intrusive, and the access to the development is through Hillside Street, which is a problem for us. While this development possibly complies with some of the provisions of the open space development laws, we feel it's contrary to the spirit of that of those laws, which is basically to preserve open space. I don't think this development is going to benefit Hillside Street, and we don't think it's going to benefit the town. I grew up in Milton. I graduated from Milton High School. I went to Glover Elementary School. I went to Cunningham Junior High School before it was Cunningham Middle School.
You're a townie.
Townie. I worked at Henry's Ice Cream for 3 years. When I went to college, I know you guys are dealing with it now.
Still
so
Henry's.
It's still Henry's, and I guess you guys are involved with it and everything else. But I've lived most of my life in the town, except for a few brief periods outside of the town, one of which was courtesy of the old Milton Draft Board. They sent me outside the country for a couple of years. I'm only telling you all that stuff just to give you a feeling of the breadth and depth of my feeling for the town. So I just ask you all to just take a look at what we're proposing here. We also feel we owe a debt of gratitude, not just me, but everybody in the town, to all the members of the boards who serve basically without compensation, without much appreciation, and I think the decision of the board will affect the town really for decades to come. And if I could just talk about a couple of specifics. These 2 trees are really historic. Caroline's house here, I think, dates from 1820. This tree, according to, in fact, let me pass this out to the members of the board, if you don't mind. I went up in there, but, we hired an environmental scientist to take a look at the 2 trees. He, a guy named Steve Ivas, and he did a report for us, which I thought was very scientific, very thorough. Those are the trees. The hickory here, it's a shagbark hickory. I guess you guys have the report in front of you. According to Steve, it's 120 years old, or 100 to 120 years old. This tree here is an American elm, which Steve thought was very, very unique. It's somewhere between 150 and 200 years old, and you could all just stop and to get your head around that number, think Civil War, War of 1812. So it's a historic piece of vegetation. The American elm has been devastated since I think 1928. Dutch elm disease arrived in this country and slowly marched across it. Arrived in the Northeast and just every couple of years moved another 50 or 100 years across the country. And the American elm was an iconic New England tree. That was every town green had them, every college campus had them, and they've been basically more or less wiped out because of Dutch elm disease. In fact, I think the city of New Haven historically was called the Elm City, but the Dutch elm hit the city, and I don't know when it was. I think it was in the 30s or early 40s, and it wiped out all the elm trees. So it's a significant tree. The biologist thought the tree was, he has all sorts of measurements here, and you guys can read it all, but he thought the tree was, the crown of the tree was as big as the crown of, apparently there's a register, a national register of what they call champion trees, and there's a state register of champion trees, and he felt that this tree was, in terms of the size of the crown, was as big as the state champion surviving elm tree, so it's a significant tree. He also thought it was the biggest elm in Milton, and he was also amazed at the fact that it was totally undiseased, which is a rarity with elm trees because of this Dutch elm disease. So I just wanted to make you folks...
He said that any change to the environment that the tree is in, the changing of the wall or the berm that protects the roots or paving over the roots would, in his opinion, destroy the tree.
I'm just going to read, just so the folks behind us can hear it. According to Mr. Ivas, where this work is proposed close to the 2 trees in the tree protection zone, also known as the critical root zone, it is my professional opinion that the proposed work will eventually kill both of these trees. I want to talk about one other thing just briefly, and then I'll give up the... we're talking about a 900-foot driveway here, but that's not really the case. It's really more like a quarter of a mile, because this 900 feet is to the border of the first lot. Obviously, this driveway is going to have to continue to access the home in the first lot and then continue on to access lot 2 and 3. So the driveway is going to end up being well over a quarter mile long.
Could you flip the other map over so we could see that a little better? Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you have anything else to say?
So what you're suggesting is that the major public driveway should include to where that yellow thing goes along the lot
Well,
line?
I think to talk about it correctly, you shouldn't talk about a 900-foot driveway. You should talk about a driveway that's closer to a third of a mile.
I'd agree with that.
Do you have anything else to say? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who wishes to speak? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Kathy McDonald. My husband and I live at 93 Hillside Street. And our house was built in 1713. It's one of the reasons that we moved to that house and to Milton, because we wanted to be a part of that kind of history. It's very disturbing to us to hear that any developer would come in and want to destroy the stone walls or endanger any of these beautiful historic trees. So we would ask that you all would do whatever you can to try to preserve the history and the trees in Milton. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Jim McDonough, and my wife Peggy and I live at 147 Hillside Street. The hedge that was being referred to is our favorite hedge, of course, and feel very strongly about it in the same way that Jim was speaking. We have consulted with landscape people and arborists.
In the middle of the driveway?
Correct, yes.
What type of a bush is it?
It's a hemlock, yeah. And the consensus that we've gotten is that any paving that would involve the space inside the drip line would result in the demise of the hedge in a relatively short time. And as Marion was pointing out, it's a privacy hedge. It's been there since we purchased the house. It had been planted there several years before. But it takes on a much larger meaning if when you walk the property, you'll see what our yard would look like if that hedge were gone. I would be very much open to this, whatever is going on in this new road, this new driveway, I should say. I'd just like to say, again, Peggy and I have lived there for 30 years and seen a lot of changes. When we moved in, it was different, of course, than it is now, and that's to be expected. But I think one of the things that we think about is, as development has come into Scottswood, and there are more and more sub-cul-de-sacs and what feel like little sub neighborhoods. We'd like to look at and say, if we can have access to some of the parcels of land that are set back from Hillside Street, but to do so in a way that we can utilize existing roadways, that would make much more sense in terms of not disrupting this street that we love so much. I'm sure that all of us who live there and all of us who know about it speak so highly about feeling as though you're someplace in the hinterlands of Vermont, and here you are 10 miles from Boston in the magnificent nature of it. So when we started talking about this with the Conservation Commission, and the discussion came back to the fact that this existing dirt driveway might have to be expanded, and they're going to have to get back all the way back to where this property is. This is a good example of this. The site map here is very clear in that the discussion that we think about is that what would be done here would be extremely disruptive to not only to the network, the neighborhood in general, but to our own little neighborhood network here with the abutting houses that here, Carolyn Gordon, Peggy and I, the Bresnahans, the Corlises, the Jebsons, and the Foleys, and this is a compact little section of the driveway. There's no question. And coming through, anything that comes through here during construction, after construction, is going to be damaging and disruptive to this community. Whereas if we had an access to get back here, at least get back to this the development property, it would solve a lot of if you get to look at this site plan and you see the existing driveway, which is in the old maps referred to as Peppermill Lane, and you see a Ford Ranch Road running parallel with it, and then you look and see where they lead. And the idea is, here you have a 50-foot wide public way with utilities. If there's a safety issue, it's eliminated by the size of the street. If we're talking about access for fire vehicles, safety vehicles to get back to this development back here, anything that happens along here in a 12-foot width driveway is going to be a difficult process to get back into this 1,200-foot area. Whereas getting down Ford Ranch Road in what is now, at least in the upper part of Ford Ranch Road, an underutilized major public way. Over here, the houses are all lined in very tight and close to the right-of-way. Over here, the houses on our side are set back away from it, and any houses on the upper part are also set way back. So there really isn't any of that immediate impact in proximity to the houses that we have here. So it was our thought that, and when we discussed this, continue to feel as though the best way to solve these issues is to, in fact, consider the utilization of Ford Ranch Road, and if in fact a bridge is required to enter, it's still it's the least disruptive way of getting back to this property. And Bob Hannigan was referring a short time ago to, I think it's the Stonebridge Lane project, which we understand took place several years ago in a similar situation where there was a fairly spread out wetlands area. Pardon me?
That's right down here, Stonebridge.
No, it would be a little bit that way.
Yeah, it's up off of Canton Avenue.
It's off Canton Ave.
Yeah. So from our perspective, we would like to think that that the board will remain open to the fact that it's it's not up to us to stifle someone's desire to try to build some houses on the land that they've owned. On the other hand, I think it's extremely important to understand that if you think the impact here on putting a bridge over a wetland is significant, when you do the walk, you think about the impact it's going to have if you were living in these homes along the existing right-of-way. Pristine, magnificent wildlife, incredible set-away feeling, runs the risk of being destroyed by the potential for bringing in the kind of project that we're talking about here, including paving aspect of it. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir. He had his hand first, and then you, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Ed Rentel. I live at 110 Ford Ranch Road. It appears that the road that's proposed through basically a wildlife area, a very thickly forested wildlife area, this proposed road will be closer to my bedroom than the existing road that I drive to get to my house every day on Ford Ranch Road. I'm totally surprised that there was even a plan to run a road right off the border of my neighbor, the Wilkies, and myself. What's also amazing is that for this to really be developed, you're talking about clear cutting 12 to 15 acres of land, because this is nothing but full, thick forest. And what you're actually talking about clear cutting 12 to 15 acres of land to put in 3 residences. And I know the changes in height of the land through here is rather extreme, and they all tend very steep. And it seems that everything, whatever kind of houses that go in here, will have to have leaching fields and whatever. And if you go in there, when you walk that property, you'll see that the land in here is very, very steep. And you're going to be leaching into wetlands any sort of septic systems that are put in for these 3 homes. But what I'm really astounded at is the idea that somebody would put a road in a forested area and never contact anybody on this street as to what their plan is. This probably is less than 100 feet from my back window of my house. And this land here has been forested, virgin wildlife forest for the millennium. And that's all I have to say.
Excuse me.
Sir, excuse me.
I know I'm not supposed to do this, but can you show me exactly?
Mr. Rendell.
I live right there.
Okay, so you don't.
That's my bedroom right there. That's my bedroom right there, yep.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
It's going good, yeah.
Months ago? I can't remember.
Excuse me, we've got somebody
Yeah.
ready to speak. Go ahead.
My name is Judith Ahrens. I live at 285 Hillside Street. I live in a 200-year-old house, and I've been there for 36 years. I would like to invite you, when you make your walk for these proposed houses, that you also look on Harlan Street at Mr. Hamilton's other handiwork. With all due respect, he has created an unspeakable eyesore on Harlan Street. He clear-cut the land. He dumped fill that had to be removed. He put up what the neighbors not so fondly call a Christmas tree farm. The stone wall is completely out of keeping with the ancient stone walls of the neighborhood. And he's built very imposing houses up close to the road. And he's really, in that section, in my opinion, destroyed the character of the street. I urge you to pay careful attention to his aesthetics. And if you do allow him to build, that you watch very carefully. But I am urging you to reject the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I will just say one thing, which is, and Bill can correct me, it wasn't actually Mr. Hamilton who put the fill on there. That was a previous owner.
It's not Mr. Hamilton who put the fill on there. It's not Mr. Hamilton who chose what the trees would be. The walls are on his property. They're not in the right-of-way, unlike the other side. It was the Conservation Commission that told him what kind of trees to plant over there. The house that you see right there is Mr. Petroselli's house, not Mr. Hamilton.
Who's developing that house?
Mr. Petroselli has all the permits in his name. Mr. Petroselli is the one who's building the house.
I just wanted to clarify.
Check it with the building.
I just wanted to clarify. Excuse me, sir, you're not yet recognized.
Yep, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify the issue of the fill, was that it was not Mr. Hamilton who put the fill. It was the previous owner. And as Bill said, it was the Conservation Commission who requested the trees, just to clarify that particular point. The specific trees, just to clarify that particular point. Thank you, ma'am, for your comments. Anybody else wish to speak?
Yes.
Please come forward.
My name's Rick Milton. I live on 555 Harlan Street.
Mm-hmm.
Little bit of a unique situation because I will be abutted to my back and already have Todd on the other side of me. Okay. And I'd like to ditto what Mrs. Aaron said. Regardless of Mr. Petroselli owning old Edie Holmgren's place in front of me, I live directly across the street from it. It's in my face every day for 5 years. As Judy said, come over and walk and have a look at it. I completely agree and second everything she had to say about Todd Stile. And I know he's doing the development also for Mr. Petroselli. And it's totally in keeping with the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't here at the very beginning of the meeting. Todd's proposing to buy that property and develop it, or correct me if I'm wrong?
He is a co-applicant on this development. I don't think we have any information on, yeah, Marianne, actually I'm going to recognize you to answer that.
Is to prepare the site and sell the lots, not to develop the lots.
So he's going to purchase the lots but not develop them?
He wouldn't build the houses. He would sell to someone else. At the end of my presentation, I talked about the fact that it...
But this proposal is for Todd and his partner to purchase the land? No. Okay.
Mr. Fandry owns the land.
Okay.
But Mr. Hamilton has a purchase and sale agreement, which is contingent upon approval of only this 3-unit open space permit. And as he has explained it to me, he would prepare the infrastructure for the development, and he would sell each of the lots, and he would be willing to put conditions on the lots as to the style of homes if that was something that was desired by the neighborhood.
Okay.
By the way, he'd be happy to be here at a future hearing to explain it himself. That's pretty much what I know.
Okay, thank you.
Is anybody else? Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Peter Kelly. I live on Ford Ranch Road, 71 Ford Ranch Road, and since 1977. I urge the planning board to be very careful of disrupting the hillside neighborhood. We all love it up there. It's unique, like Eddie said, 10 miles from the city, and it's got a lot of character, and I'm in the real estate business in the town, but I'd hate to see the area disrupted and developed and uncharacteristic. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak? Please come forward.
My name is Carolyn Bedell. I live on 145 Hillside Street, a relative newcomer to my neighborhood. I've lived there since 2005. And I live in the Nathaniel Stafford house, which is the first piece of property that was mentioned. I don't have any official door access to the access road, but my bedroom window is probably 30 feet away. So I know when people are cutting their grass, I know when the mail is delivered, I know when Esther is taking a walk down the street to get her mail. I mean, if I wanted to stand by my bedroom window, I know everything that's going on that access road. My home is probably almost about the same size, if not smaller, than most of the construction vehicles would be that would have to access that road in order to build those houses. And you know, I had lived in an absolutely beautiful, huge house over on the other side of Milton on Russell Street. I also had one of the biggest copper beech trees in Milton. Now I have one of the most beautiful elm trees in Milton. But I downsized because it was time for me to do that. It wasn't time for me to have dump trucks coming by and new houses being built, and you know, it's time to quiet down a little bit. And I raised my children, I loved my home, but it was time to downsize and quiet down. I love my neighbors. My house in the basement, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble, but I think there's actually support beams in my house that were built from trees. It's 200 years old. And it's not all of them, but I think there's some down there. And that's the classic of my house. It's a home. And it sits on this beautiful dirt driveway, and you know, everybody sort of can hear what everybody else is doing. I'm not against the development of, it's not my place to say whether people have a right or not to develop property that they own. But I think we all have a responsibility. I'm nervous, but I'm doing it anyway. We have a responsibility to our neighborhood and to our town to maintain areas like this that are, if there's another possibility, any other possibility, I think it should be explored. This is I don't think it would be right. I also have that elm tree on the corner of my property. It's on a berm. And I've seen the stakes on the side of the property. There's no way you can't interfere with the berm that elm tree is sitting on. There's just no way. And with McDonough's hedges, it's all been laid out with white sticks, and the white sticks are underneath the overlay of those hemlocks. It's just not, I mean, it just depends on what your rules are. But anyway, I just felt like I needed to say something because it's a very special place. I would not, when I lived on Russell Street all those years, I thought to myself, if I'm ever going to move, it's going to be to Hillside Street. And I did. I lucked out. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
I'm Steve Bresnahan. I live with my family at 159 Hillside Street, so I'm Carolyn's neighbor across the hot spot across the dirt road. And I would echo my concern that the impact on the entry off of Hillside Street will be far greater than I think was emphasized today. When you take the walk, it's well staked as to where the opening needs to be according to the fire chief. And that opening that they're proposing will absolutely hug these two trees. And I just can't imagine, I mean, really within inches. And I just can't imagine that you're going to put utilities, dig up that road, pave it, and not kill those two trees. So they're two, if you look at them, look up, because they're the two tallest trees in the entire neighborhood. And I think those trees will go down. I mean, I think one question I have is, you know, when those trees go down and they go across the road and it's a snowstorm and there's a 1,200-foot road with 4 residences back there, how does a fire truck get there anyway? But I think mainly I wanted to emphasize that I think it will really change the character, the appearance, and the nature of our neighborhood. That's been a dirt road for a very long period of time. It has a very country feel to it, and it will have a major impact, and I think change a little corner of Milton that has been preserved for a long time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
I'm Robert Massey, 291 Hillside Street. I wanted to speak to the board about the need to have you be on our side enforcing the town bylaws. In particular, let me point out that with the scenic road bylaw, when it was passed, one of the features of it calls for no circular driveways with 2 cuts. Since that was passed, we've had 3 double cuts through the stone walls, and none of them has had a special permit from the town. So when it comes to the cut in the stone wall that's being requested now, I think at the very least, it needs to be, if this is passed, it needs to be absolutely minimal, and it needs to be completely consistent with the character of what's there now. And not like the spite wall we see on Harlan Street, for example. The second thing is, I'd like to speak also for your beautiful elm tree. There are, in fact, 2 fabulous elm trees in this neighborhood. This is the oldest one. The largest one is actually just around the corner on Randolph Avenue. If you look carefully at that one on Randolph Avenue, and I just photographed it yesterday, it is actually bigger. This one is 12 feet in circumference. That one is about 14 feet at breast height. The one on Randolph Avenue during the construction, it has a scar that is taller than I am, 6 feet tall, and it's about this wide. So irregardless of how a developer says he's going to absolutely protect that tree, it happens. But once it happens, that's it. That's the last chance. So I would like you to go to bat for us and to protect our assets. And we'd like to feel as though those bylaws are written in stone for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir?
My name's Bobby Jepson. I live at 165 Hillside Street. I live at Ground Zero. And I want to thank the people that are here tonight that don't live at Ground Zero for coming out. And I think we're all opposed to this. But I have visual aids here. And
oh,
sorry. I might actually use that. Please. Thank you. Yeah, there you go. I'm a little like Mr. Magoo here. But I've lived here all my life. And thank you. And I was in the back of the room, and I don't hear well, and especially when people don't face me. So I really haven't heard much of anything. So, but it's okay. I thought of that before I came.
This will help.
And what I'm going to talk about, no one else can, because I've lived there for 60 years, and I've maintained a common driveway for 60 years, me and my dad. And my grandfather used to own the land we're talking about tonight. I'm sorry, I don't do well public speaking, but I'm all prepared. I don't know much, but after 60 years at 165 Hillside Street, I do know about maintaining a common driveway. I also know, as you may recall, about having, I know about having a conflict with your neighbor. You may recall that. You don't want to fight with your neighbor. Not only providing safe access, but trying to provide tranquility, I would say, is a goal of the board. I'm shaking him. Is this. I have a pal who's another lifelong Milton resident. He calls this place the last place left.
Want to sit down, sir? You'd like to sit here?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you. He may be right. It's untouched. Not a scrap of litter or a piece of plastic. Ed here, he counted 30 deer. Were there 30 that you call counting the deer?
On any given day.
There's so many deer in there, you have no idea. And the people that hate the deer, don't tell them. They're wonderful. And they're always there. They're there now, they're there tomorrow, you can count them. If you saw the trails they make in the snow, you'd believe it. Geez, they really are a ton of deer. It's extraordinary. It's pristine. I respect the board's time, and I don't want to waste it going over the long list of shortcomings with this plan. The situation is you can't go over the brook anymore unless there are no other options. And if you have to go over the brook, it's hugely expensive. And the goal of the years is to sell the land at the highest price. And if you let this plan happen, everyone but the people that live here will profit from your largesse. But if two of you say no, the abutters can afford to acquire it, I think. I would like to say that Joe Fandry gets calls all the time about inquiring about the sale of the land. All the time. It was a joke.
Millions of people in Milton County.
I say,
Hold.
Thank you.
Can you hold it?
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, my pleasure.
The goal of the heirs is to sell the land at the highest price. If you let this plan happen, everyone but the people that live here profit from your largesse. But if two of you say no, the abutters, I think, can afford to acquire it. I would like to say that Joe Fandry gets calls all the time inquiring about selling the land. It amused him. The regulations about going over the brook have changed without warning. Things change, and sometimes value is lost. I have two old Fords that are worth a fraction of what they were just a few years ago. We all have such stories about something we've owned too long. I learned about this open space development plan about a year ago, I guess. It was news to me. I have a pal in Western Mass that I email a lot, and he knew all about it. They don't do that anymore here, said Ed. What happens is the cooperation between the neighbors over the maintenance of the driveway breaks down. And they ask the town to get involved with repairs to the substandard road. That all the folks that live on the driveway now will have rights to the new driveway without joining a maintenance association, I believe, is the fatal flaw in their plan. I learned that after I spoke with Mark Rassicott, who is at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council downtown. And by luck, he knew all about shared driveways, unlike anyone else in these parts. He was the planner on Martha's Vineyard, where there are plenty of them. What he said you needed was an association that is capable of collecting funds and attaching liens. That's exactly what you don't have with this plan. None of the people with rights will join in the association. Moreover, when I'm through telling you about where we live, I think you'll agree this is not a good plan for the planning board to support. I am a party of interest, but I am not a party of financial interest. I think everyone here in this room that does not live on Hillside Street, and even the town itself, is a party of financial interest. I suggest you talk to Mark Rassicott at the MAPC yourselves and learn about shared driveways. The Ford Ranch access was always the plan, always. We are not unreasonable. This was never the deal. This is why the Fandrys have been absent. It's embarrassing, but it's profitable. This is an early area plan of the area, around the turn of the century, 1900. You won't see the brook that we're talking about tonight on the plan, but you will see Brook Lane. Now, Pine Tree Brook is on the plan. I believe what happened is the uphill road, goes straight uphill, washed out and became the brook we're talking about tonight. When I was a kid, I'd play in the pipe underneath Hillside. It was dry all summer, what we call an intermittent stream. This plan joins two assessor's plans. In the 60s, Tom Crosby bought the Burnett Estate. That's where the nuns lived, if you remember. And he built Parkwood Drive, Briarbrook Lane, and Barberry Lane. But he didn't build Briarbrook Street. He didn't build this because it was all wet. And he sold the land to a smart guy who built a tremendous hay bale wall. He was a heavy equipment guy. And if I can remember this, as a kid, I was probably 16, looking at this edifice, and it was intimidating. Don't screw with me. Keep out of here. And of course, he filled and put plumbing in and piped it. And you can see it, there's the edge of the wetland. Well, isn't that convenient right behind the houses? And there's Brook Lane here. Anyway, Brook Lane there, right there. And it increased the flow of the brook. Now you can't go over it, the brook with no name. What's the name, Bob? What's the name of that brook? There's no name of the brook. This is the lot behind where former planning board chairman Draper lived. He sold the land to someone who built one of these huge houses, the kind that construction never ends. You think it's done, it's another addition. And then when the house was completely done, then there was a big crazy garage. When construction was done, the new landscaping project began. It went on for 2 years and used a vast amount of fill, despite my telling both the resident and the people that work in this building what was going on. 2 years after the evisceration of state law, the backyard of this residential home was permitted to operate as a farm. As a farm, it operates without accountability to town laws. Filling, heavy equipment operate there. This is the back of that lot. When you see it from Hillside Street, if you can see it, it's concealed as well. It's hard to see what's in there. But if you look uphill, and I guess you're coming to see, I'll show it to you. There's the stone wall, and there's the fill, which is gargantuan up behind it. As a result of the filling of the two adjacent locations, here and here, okay, there's the farm, there's the McMansion, this is the puddle. This is the big puddle, and it's really big. And the problem with the puddle is it draws water from all over, but there's only one exit. And there's the exit. Goes to Jepson, that's me. There I am sitting in the gorge, created by the filling, the illegal filling, and the farm. When I asked Joe Prondek what he was going to do about it, he said I had to seek civil damages. I'm on my own. Jepson, you're on your own. This lot was filled with multiple loads of clay years ago, before the current owner moved in. It was declared a wetland, but nothing was removed, of course. Nothing ever is. And clay is terrible. Clay doesn't perk. Why did they use clay? Because it was cheap. She had no money. And the trucks flowed and flowed and flowed. And the Hillside Street was like grease. It was dangerous. You couldn't stop your car. And that's what made my father so mad. More than anything, she was so damn stupid. She polluted the neighborhood with clay, and all the water ran to Jepson. Now, actually, I should say, some fill was removed to shut up Jepson from the back of the McMansion. And they brought it around, they put it at the farm. Got any problem, Jepson? Good. See you, Jepson.
Mr. Jepson, I don't want to, I don't want to stifle your comments, but you
Get to the
are
point.
moving. Yes, that would be it.
Here's the point. Most recently, the storm drains on Hillside Street became plugged. Without them, so much water ran down Hillside Street and off the road here and onto the paddock and down to Jepson. It's all about the water going to Jepson. And the water that leaves Jepson is going down this new driveway, where there's no town maintenance. It'll wash it away. And the engineers will say, that's just water, don't worry about it. And the reason we're here tonight is because of Brook Lane. We're here because of the water. We can't go over the brook with no name.
Cooks Brook.
Is it Cooks Brook?
Cooks Brook.
You found the name?
Sure.
Well, they've been asking me what the name is, and
We'll find it for you.
well, anyway, when it rains like hell here at Jepson, the water is inches deep in a field. And it's like going across the river because you're on the side of the hill and this is all uphill. This is all uphill. And the storm drains, once they plugged up with gravel, then the water ran off and across down to Jepson. So this was the fix. Was that won't last too long. Well, anyway, this is why my pal Ed, I should back up. I won't be a participant in the maintenance of the road, but all the water will flow off me and wash out the road. So they'll be even more angry about Jepson. This is why my pal Ed, familiar with these open space driveways, this is what he predicted. Before I sit down, I want to say the open space development law was designed to mitigate development impact. It was not designed to facilitate development, where development is otherwise not possible. This is like the sand pit. The purpose of the farm law wasn't to put a gravel pit behind a residential house in a historic neighborhood. A driveway 12 feet wide and over a quarter-mile long going downhill and north at the very bottom of the hillside, effectively telling the families there that they are on their own while they pay huge taxes, seems to me bad planning. And it's going to be disaster in a blizzard. We need your help. Hillside Street is great, but it didn't fall from outer space. A lot of people over the years doing the right thing are responsible. Join their ranks. Forget the money. There's never enough. Thank you, and I look forward to your visiting the last place left.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Esther Jepson, and I live at 165 Hillside, and I, of course, am an abutter to all of this. And I have several points to make on my own behalf. I think the chief concern here is public safety. This driveway is going to be a quarter of a mile deep. At the present time, if you drive out and you meet your neighbor, and I only have one of us has to back up all the way. So the town has never been happy about dead-end streets, and I never heard of one that was proposed to be this long. I think the matter is public safety, not only for us, but the police and the fire department of this town. We should be working with them not to create something that's relatively impossible. In other words, if there is a problem, and you're talking about doubling the number of automobiles now that are going to be using a private driveway, I would want to say that Ford Ranch Road was purchased by Mr. Fandry, a friend of mine many years ago, the senior Mr. Fandry, now deceased, for the benefit of the property. And that was good planning on his part. I have one thing to call to your attention, and we don't need to resolve it now. Excuse me. But I looked at the plan that's been proposed, and I see just a little over 5, they called it building envelope acres. And I thought we needed 10 acres, not 5 buildable acres, but you can check into that. I don't know what that means. Now, I have other members of the family that are abutters, and their name is Foley, and they sent the planning board a letter, which I so admired. And I would like to, if you've all had a copy of it, it will be up to you. I would be delighted to read it into the record. They were not able to be here this evening.
We all have a copy. I'd be happy to read it into the record after we're done.
It depends on the planning board. If you feel as though I don't need to read it into the record, but I think their assessment of the situation is so worthwhile that I would love to, with your pleasure. Is that all right if I read their letter?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Sure.
It's fine.
Dear members of the Milton Planning Board, we are writing to state our opposition to the development plan currently proposed by the estate of Joseph Fandry and developer Todd Hamilton, located off Hillside Street. We reside at 161 Hillside Street and have lived there for over 37 years. Our primary concern is that access to this property using the narrow existing driveway is solely motivated by the cost to the developer and not the safety of the current and future residents. This 15.25 acre parcel includes frontage on Ford Ranch Road, a paved town street. An additional lot was also purchased by Mr. Fandry in 1978 for this purpose of accessing his property and making future development feasible. We are now being told that it is cost prohibitive to construct an access over the wetlands along Ford Ranch Road, but we have never heard an estimate. This development will be for million-dollar homes, so it seems reasonable to explore this option. With this current proposal, 8 households will have to use a historic single-lane drive as an egress. The current driveway has consistently posed issues of snow plowing and icing. At times, the length of this access has been impassable. Indeed, that is the case. I can vouch for that. And I must say that on a snowy day, I still drive out, and I just put my foot on the gas and try to make the grade, and everybody's abandoned if you get stuck there, or if a truck were to have to come in and try to haul you out. It's very troublesome. As longtime residents, we have experienced this condition on a number of occasions. In addition, I may be repeating myself. Let's see. In addition to the driveway condition in winter weather, a second serious safety issue is the driveway length. At a Hillside Neighborhood Association meeting, the former Milton fire chief stated that the homes at 165, mine, and 151 were beyond the usual limits of fire equipment response. We found this to be an extremely disturbing statement. This application now seeks to double the length. The impacts on the use of this Hillside Street driveway are many. Significant moving and widening the scenic stone walls, removal of negative impact on existing valuable trees, increasing the density and use on a simple driveway, one that predates 1938 Milton zoning bylaws, and extending it beyond a safe access for all residents involved merits serious consideration. All other viable options to access this property safely should be explored regardless of expense. We urge the planning board to be cautious and deliberate in their consideration of this proposal. We also hope that the board will confirm whether the land actually complies with the open space development plan bylaw of 10 buildable acres. The layout of the property is extremely irregular, and there are many significant areas of wetlands spread throughout the parcel, making it difficult to accurately assess if there actually is sufficient buildable land. We are unable to be present at this important public hearing, and we would request that this letter be read into the record. Respectfully, Kenan and Stephanie Foley, and copy went to the Milton Historical Commission and the Milton Conservation Commission. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Pardon?
I was just asking if anybody else wished to speak. So, anyone else? I should note that we'd also received a letter from Virginia Ann Brophy, Esquire of Brophy and Leonard LLC, writing on behalf of her clients, Jim and Kathleen Corliss. The board members have all received a copy of this letter, and among other things, it does request for a continuance, which we would have granted anyway, since there's a lot for the board to consider. If nobody else wishes to speak, Marion, if you will come back, I at least have a quick question for you. And I don't know if you want to make a statement and if any of the other board members have any questions. So my question, quick question, is Assessor's Lot K8-21B. Do you know who owns that? It's right along Ford Ranch Road.
Is it the sliver of
It's the sliver with the wider open.
That's part of
That
this
is part of the
property.
property. Is there any reason we can't have the road go over that? Has that been explored?
See the size of that wetland?
I'm just looking at the.
Bob, could you?
Yeah, because
could you
we
bring
talked about the other wetland, but we haven't talked
drawing a
about
little
this
bit
one.
closer so we can look?
That's what I want to ask you.
I mean, I think it's a fair question, and I've thought of that myself, and I guess that, I don't even know what the dimensions would have to be or anything else. The problem isn't just this wetland, though, because in order to get into these other lots, you have to cross another area of wetlands. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I just wanted to make sure we talked about
I think
both
it's pretty
spots
clear
on
from
Ford
what
Ranch
everybody's
Road.
saying
Yeah.
tonight that every option would have to be exhausted, I think, to get support for this approach. I mean, you can talk about these things conceptually or generally and say, it looks like this might not work. The Conservation Commission, we think, would deny access across Ford Ranch Road. We don't have that decision. I can't tell you that they've denied it. So you can see the wetland situation. You can see the stream. Perhaps, I don't know, there's a possibility of going in here.
Marion, is this standing water? Is it actually standing
Well,
water?
I can tell you that
Bordering vegetated wetlands.
if the Corlisses are still here, they'll tell you that from their house, when you look down, this land goes down. This is fairly steep. There's another map that shows the topography. You can see the water. And it's been visible pretty much throughout this season. Now, I know we're ending the winter, but it wasn't a very cold winter. And it has been rather dry, and you can still see water down there. And I know that historically that wasn't true. I mean, as we all know, with other developments and other things that have happened, sometimes these conditions change. That's why I can't tell you what the determination will be about what that is, that waterway. There are factors. Most of it relates to whether you have a certain length of period during which there's no water. But it also is a question of what the size of the watershed is up above it, and whether it's big enough to be generating enough water to create a continual flow. And that's something the wetlands biologist has to explain for us. But all I can tell you, I mean, I really don't have concluding remarks because I'm here to listen as much as anyone else and to take back to my client, who is the proposed developer, just exactly what all of the concerns expressed tonight were. And also, it's pretty clear, you know, the general feeling of the neighborhood is that they're really concerned about this method of access. And after taking that information back in my notes and anything else that I can get, there might have been a couple things that I didn't pick up, you know, documents that were submitted. You know, we'd be coming back to the continued hearing to discuss this further and see whether there are different thoughts, you know, coming from the developer or from the owner, although I don't represent the owner. This information certainly would be conveyed back to the Fandries as well.
Do any other members of the board have questions? Pete, you had a question?
I've got a question for Mr. Corliss. In the letter that your attorney submitted, she references a vested interest of Mass DCR. Do you know what that interest is?
Okay. So, and I believe your attorney would be able to attend the continued hearing. It was just she wasn't able to attend tonight, so we can ask her then. Okay. Anything else from members of the board?
I would like to say that when we have our next hearing on 131 Elliott Street, I don't want to have this continued hearing at that same time.
It won't be. We're going to continue it to the following meeting, so May 3rd. I think for the sake of all of those who patiently waited, we're going to make sure that these two hearings are separate. We will also make sure we get a larger room. So again, I apologize. Wonderful to see so many people here, but we weren't quite expecting so many of you. So we will continue it to May 3rd. Do we already have a time on May 3rd for anything else, Bill, or can we open this up? Then let's make this one at 6:45, since you have the option of being the first one. And we will be in a larger room on May 3rd at 6:45 for this.
Maybe the Council on Aging.
If we can get that,
as
if not,
opposed to the Carol Blue conference room.
we will get whichever room is available. So, all right, that's that for that hearing. Thank you all very much for attending.
You're continued until your site walk on.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Thank you. Continued to the site walk at 8 a.m. on April 21st, and then we will continue that.
Well, no, well, and thereafter continue to.
And thereafter continue
Right.
to. Thank you.
Your meeting point is going to be at the driveway entrance.
Driveway entrance
Under the
to
elm
sidewalk.
tree.
We can all park on the roots of the elm tree.
Are we ready to adjourn?
We are, let me just check the agenda. Patience.
All right, Jesus.
Since we have not had the town planners report.
Doesn't have anything to do.
Mr. Clark, do you have anything for the town planners report? All right, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have what? Nothing? Okay. Do I have a second to adjourn? Do I have a vote? Yes? Aye? 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 All right, we are adjourned.